My son's wife banned me from seeing my grandchildren. 6 months later, she begged me to babysit. When my daughter-in-law told me I would never see my grandchildren again, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply nodded, walked to my car, and drove away. 6 months later, she was standing on my doorstep at 11 p.m., mascara running down her face, asking if I could watch the kids for just a few days. You won't believe what I said next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I need to take you back to the beginning, back to when I was still the hero of this story, instead of the villain they tried to make me. My name is Patricia Chen. I'm 64 years old, and for 37 of those years, I built one of the most successful accounting firms in Portland, Oregon. Chen and Associates. Maybe you've seen our building downtown. The one with the green glass windows on Burnside Street. 12 floors. 243 employees at our peak. My husband David and I started it in 1987 with nothing but a rented desk, a second-hand calculator, and the kind of stubborn determination that only immigrants truly understand. David passed away in 2019, pancreatic cancer. Fast and merciless, the way he would have wanted it. He hated lingering, hated being a burden. 4 months from diagnosis to funeral, and suddenly I was alone in a house that felt like a museum of our life together. But I wasn't completely alone. I had Jason. My son was born in 1991, 3 years after we opened the firm. I remember David holding him in the hospital, tears streaming down his face, saying, "Now we know why we work so hard." And we did work hard. 80-hour weeks when Jason was a baby, missing school plays and soccer games. The guilt that every working mother carries like a second heartbeat. We tried to make up for it with money, piano lessons, private school, a car for his 16th birthday, a BMW, because David insisted our son should never feel less than his classmates. Stanford for undergrad, Columbia for law school. We paid for everything. $847,000 in education alone. I have the receipts. I have receipts for everything. Accountants don't forget numbers. Jason met Victoria during his second year at Columbia. Victoria Hayes, from the Connecticut Hayes family. Old money. The kind of family that summered in Martha's Vineyard and used summer as a verb. She was getting her MBA at the same time, positioning herself for a career in luxury brand management. Beautiful, ambitious, and so completely wrong for my son that I knew they'd be married within a year. They were married in 8 months. At her family's estate in Greenwich. 250 guests, none of whom I knew. David and I sat at table 14, somewhere near the kitchen, watching our son become part of a world that looked at us like we were the help. But that's not the point of this story. The point is what came after. The twins were born in 2018, Emma and Lucas. I was in Portland when Victoria went into labor 3 weeks early. By the time I landed at JFK and took a taxi to the hospital, they were already 8 hours old. Victoria's mother had been in the delivery room. Victoria's mother had cut the cords. I arrived to find the Hayes family filling every chair in the maternity ward, while I stood in the doorway like an uninvited guest. "Patricia, you made it," Victoria said from her hospital bed, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for me. Not hostile, exactly, just dismissive. The way you'd greet a delivery person who'd arrived at an inconvenient time. I came as fast as I could. I moved toward the bassinet where 2 tiny humans were sleeping, their faces red and wrinkled and perfect. "They're beautiful. They have Victoria's nose," her mother announced. Margaret Hayes, 67 years old, tennis 4 times a week, a facelift so tight you could bounce quarters off her cheekbones. And the Hayes chin, you can already see it. I looked at my grandchildren's faces and saw David. The shape of his eyes, the particular curve of his earlobes. My husband, gone for a year, somehow returned in miniature form. I started crying before I could stop myself. "Mom." Jason appeared beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "You okay? They look like your father." Victoria and Margaret exchanged a glance I wasn't supposed to see. The kind of glance that said, "Here we go." The kind of glance that made me feel like my grief was an inconvenience they had to tolerate. "They look like themselves," Victoria said smoothly. "Completely unique." For the next 4 years, I played the role they assigned me. The role of the grandmother who showed up when summoned, brought appropriate gifts, and left before overstaying her welcome. I flew to New York for every birthday, Every holiday, every milestone I was permitted to witness. First steps, first words, first day of preschool. I stayed at hotels because Victoria said their guest room was being renovated, a renovation that somehow lasted 43 months. I scheduled my visits around Margaret Hayes's visits because Victoria explained they didn't have room for both grandmothers at once. It's just easier this way, Jason would say whenever I questioned the arrangement. You know how Victoria's mother is. She gets overwhelmed with too many people around. Too many people. As if I were a crowd instead of a single woman who just wanted to know her grandchildren. But I swallowed it. I swallowed every slight, every exclusion, every moment of being treated like a second-class relative. Because Emma and Lucas were worth it. Their faces on my phone screen during our weekly video calls. Their voices asking, "Grandma Pat, when are you coming?" Their drawings arriving in my mailbox with wobbly hearts and stick figures that were supposed to be us. I would have swallowed anything for them. And then came the money. Jason called me in March 2022, 2 months after I'd sold Chen and Associates for a figure that made the business section of the Oregonian. $42 million after taxes. Enough to fund generations of security, of opportunity, of never having to worry about anything material ever again.
Mom, I need to talk to you about something.
I was sitting on my back deck, watching the spring rain fall on my garden. David's garden, really. I'd never had the patience for growing things, but I'd kept it alive, because letting it die felt like losing him twice. What is it, honey? Victoria and I are thinking about buying a new place. Somewhere with more space for the kids. A real house instead of the apartment. They've been living in a 3-bedroom on the Upper West Side. 1,700 square feet, more than enough space by any reasonable standard. But Victoria had grown up in a 12,000 square foot estate, and reasonable wasn't a concept she applied to herself. That sounds exciting, I said carefully. The thing is, Mom, the kind of house we're looking at, the kind of neighborhood where we want to raise Emma and Lucas, it's expensive, really expensive. How expensive? There's a place in Scarsdale, good schools, safe streets, room for the kids to have their own play areas, you know. But the asking price is, he paused, $4.2 million. I did the math automatically, the way I've been doing math my whole career. Down payment, closing costs, property taxes, maintenance on a house that size. And how much do you need? If you could help with the down payment, say $800,000, we could make the mortgage work on our salaries. $800,000. Said so casually, like he was asking to borrow my car for the weekend. Jason, that's a lot of money. I know, Mom. Believe me, I know. But think about it. Emma and Lucas would have a yard. Their own rooms. They grow up in the kind of place where they could thrive. And you'd always have somewhere to stay when you visit. We'd finally have a proper guest suite. A guest suite, after 4 years of hotels. Let me think about it. I thought about it for 3 days. Called my financial advisor. Ran projections on my retirement needs versus my assets. Considered what David would have said. David would have said yes. David always said yes to Jason. On the 4th day, I called my son back. I'll give you the down payment. $800,000. But I want it to be a gift, not a loan. I don't want money complicating our relationship. Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. Victoria is going to be thrilled. Victoria was thrilled. I know because she sent me a 3-line text message. Thank you, Patricia. This means a lot to us. The kids will love having space. No phone call. No card. 3 lines. They closed on the house in July. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard with a swing set that I paid for separately. Another $14,000 because Victoria saw one she liked in a catalog and mentioned how perfect it would be for the twins. You're too generous, Mom, Jason said when I transferred the money. I should have heard the warning in his voice, the slight emphasis on too. But I was distracted by the promise of that guest suite, the promise of finally having a real place in my grandchildren's lives. The first time I visited the new house was in September 2022. I drove from Portland because I'd started hating airports after David died. 18 hours across Washington and Montana and the upper curve of the country, my car packed with gifts for Emma and Lucas. Educational toys, books about dinosaurs and princesses, and a children's history of China that I've been saving since they were born. I pulled into their driveway at 3:47 p.m., exhausted but excited. The house looked exactly like the photos Victoria had texted. White colonial, black shutters, red door. Picture perfect. Somewhere David and I might have dreamed about when we were starting out, before we understood that dreams have interest rates. Jason came out to meet me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mom, you made good time. Where are my grandchildren?" I was already looking past him, expecting Emma and Lucas to come running out like they did in my imagination. "They're inside." "But listen, before you go in, there's something you should know." "What?" "Victoria's mother is here." My stomach dropped. I thought we agreed. I know. But she surprised us. Showed up 2 days ago, said she missed the kids. What were we supposed to do? Turn her away? Yes, I thought. Yes, that's exactly what you should have done. That's what you always do to me, but I said, of course not, it's fine. I'm sure we can all get along for a few days. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Inside, the house smelled of Victoria's signature candles, $200 each. I'd looked them up, and the particular brand of tension that only competing grandmothers can generate. Margaret Hayes was sitting on a cream-colored sofa that probably cost more than my first car, one twin under each arm, reading from a book I didn't recognize. "Patricia." She looked up with a smile that showed too many teeth. "What a surprise. Jason mentioned you weren't arriving until next week." I looked at my son. He studied the floor. "Must have been a miscommunication," I said. "Grandma Pat." Emma wriggled free and ran toward me, her arms outstretched. She was 4 years old, all curly hair and missing teeth and the pure joy of childhood. "You're here. Did you bring presents?" I knelt down and hugged her so tightly she squeaked. "I always bring presents." Lucas was slower, more reserved. He approached carefully, studying me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve. "Grandma, your car is dirty. I drove a very long way to see you. Grandmother Hayes says long drives are for people who can't afford planes." The room went silent. Emma kept hugging me, oblivious. Margaret coughed delicately into her hand. Jason stared at a spot on the wall, like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Lucas," Victoria's voice came from the kitchen doorway. That wasn't polite. But Grandmother Hayes said, "Go to your room." He went, casting one confused look over his shoulder. 4 years old and already learning that truth was something to be punished. Victoria emerged fully, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Patricia, you're early. Apparently. Well, since you're here, you might as well come in. I'll have Jason bring your bags to the guest room." A pause, almost imperceptible. "I hope you don't mind, but we've put Mother in the guest suite. You'll be in the basement." The basement. The guest suite that had been the reason for my $800,000, and I was being put in the basement. "That's fine," I said. It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. But Emma was still holding my hand, and Lucas was upstairs needing someone to tell him he hadn't done anything wrong. And I was so tired of being angry at people who wouldn't change. The basement guest room was nicer than I'd expected. Victoria had decorated it with the same catalog perfect taste she applied to everything. Gray walls, white bedding, abstract art that said nothing and cost everything. A small window near the ceiling let in a rectangle of September light. Not unpleasant, just underground, hidden away where guests wouldn't have to see me. I unpacked my suitcase slowly, listening to the muffled sounds of life happening above me. Footsteps, the twins' laughter. Margaret's voice, carrying that particular pitch of authority that old money uses like a weapon. At 6 p.m., Victoria called down the stairs that dinner would be ready in an hour. Not an invitation to join them in the kitchen, not an offer to help, just information delivered from a safe distance. I showered, changed into the nicest blouse I'd packed, and climbed the stairs at precisely 7 o'clock. The dining room looked like a magazine spread. Cloth napkins, actual silver, candles that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Emma and Lucas sat on booster seats, their faces scrubbed clean, wearing matching outfits that screamed expensive and uncomfortable. "Grandma Pat," Emma waved her fork dangerously. "Sit next to me. Emma, we discussed this." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "Grandmother Hayes is sitting next to you tonight. Grandma Pat can sit across the table. Across the table. As far from my grandchildren as geometry allowed." I took my assigned seat without protest. Jason poured wine, a Napa Valley Cabernet that I recognized from a case I'd sent them last Christmas. and avoided my eyes. So, Patricia. Margaret unfolded her napkin with the precision of someone who'd been taught table manners before she could walk. Jason tells me you sold your little business. Congratulations. Thank you. What will you do with yourself now? All that free time must be overwhelming for someone who's used to working. The emphasis on working made it sound like a disease. I'm still consulting, and I serve on 3 nonprofit boards: the Portland Children's Hospital, the Asian American Business Association, and the Oregon Literacy Council. How civic-minded. Margaret's smile didn't waver. I always admire people who find ways to stay useful after their productive years are behind them. Victoria coughed. Jason reached for more wine. The twins ate their organic chicken nuggets, oblivious to the war being waged across the tablecloth. Mother serves on several boards as well, Victoria offered, filling the silence. The Greenwich Historical Society, the Junior League. The difference, of course, is that I've served on those boards since my 20s. It's about shaping institutions, not padding a resume after retirement. I set down my fork, counted to 5 in my head the way David had taught me during the years when my temper could have cost us clients. Margaret, I built a $200 million company from nothing. I've created jobs for thousands of people. I've funded scholarships for first-generation college students across Oregon. What exactly have you built? The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Mom. Jason's voice carried a warning I chose to ignore. I'm asking a genuine question. I'm curious what Margaret considers a productive contribution to society, since apparently working for a living doesn't qualify. Margaret's face had gone rigid, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching beneath her lifted skin. Victoria, I think perhaps your mother-in-law is tired from her drive. Maybe she should rest. I'm not tired. Nevertheless, Victoria stood, her hostess' smile firmly in place. It's been a long day for everyone. Patricia, why don't you take your plate downstairs? I'm sure you'll be more comfortable eating in your room. My room. The basement. Sent away like a misbehaving child, while Margaret Hayes remained at the table with my grandchildren. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to say something. Anything. To defend his mother the way any son should. He was studying his wine glass like it contained the answer to questions he was too afraid to ask. Fine. I stood, picked up my plate, and walked toward the basement stairs with as much dignity as I could muster. Good night, Emma. Good night, Lucas. Grandma Pat loves you. Love you, Grandma Pat, Emma called after me. Lucas said nothing. He was watching his father, learning exactly what kind of man to become. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in my basement room, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in my head the way I always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. $800,000 for the down payment. $14,000 for the swing set. The BMW I'd bought Jason for his 30th birthday. $62,000. Victoria's engagement ring, which Jason had confessed he couldn't afford. $28,000, transferred quietly so his future wife would never know her diamond came from his mother's savings. The wedding we paid for because the Hayes family covered the venue and catering but somehow forgot about flowers, photography, and the honeymoon, $47,000. The education, the monthly deposits during law school when Jason's stipend didn't cover Manhattan rent. The loans that were never repaid, never even mentioned again. Over $1 million, probably closer to 1.2 if I added up every restaurant meal, every emergency car repair, every casually requested favor that somehow always involved my checkbook. And this was my reward. A basement room while Margaret Hayes slept upstairs in the suite my money had bought. At 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps above me, then voices, muffled but getting clearer as I crept up the stairs and pressed my ear to the door. Can't believe she spoke to me that way. Margaret's voice, sharp with outrage. I know, Mother. I'm so sorry. Victoria, soothing and sympathetic. After everything we've done for her son, the connections we've provided, the social capital, and she has the audacity to question my contributions. She's always been like this, defensive about her background. Jason warned me when we first started dating. My son, warning his girlfriend about his mother. The woman has no breeding, no understanding of how things work. Margaret again, her voice dripping with contempt. Did you see her at the wedding? Walking around like she owned the place just because she'd written some checks. I remember. And now she expects to be treated like family. After buying her way in, I leaned closer to the door, my heart pounding so loud I was afraid they'd hear it. The problem, Victoria said slowly, is that we still need her. What do you mean? The house was just the beginning, Mother. Jason and I have been talking. Emma and Lucas will need private school next year. Rye Country Day is $47,000 per student annually. Then there's summer camp, extracurriculars. The violin teacher I want for Emma charges $300 an hour. And you think Patricia will pay for all of that? She paid for everything else. We just have to manage her correctly. Keep her feeling involved enough to keep writing checks, but not so involved that she thinks she has any actual authority over how we raise the children. The words hit me like physical blows. Manage her. Keep her writing checks. No actual authority. It's a delicate balance, Victoria continued. Too much access and she'll start thinking she has opinions that matter. Too little and she might close the checkbook. Jason's been handling it, but honestly, he's not very good at boundaries. He never was. Too soft, that one. Gets it from his father's side. Victoria laughed, a genuine laugh, warm and conspiratorial. Probably. But he's useful. He keeps Patricia attached without me having to deal with her directly. And what about your father's offer? Has Jason considered it? Silence. A long, pregnant pause that made me hold my breath. He's considering it. The position at the firm would pay 3 times what he makes now. But he'd have to pass the Connecticut bar, and Patricia would expect him to take over her business instead. Take over an accounting firm in Oregon? Margaret's voice carried pure disdain. That's hardly the same as practicing real law at a respected firm in Greenwich. I know, but Jason feels some obligation, guilt, maybe. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all. He has a choice between his future and his mother's expectations. The fact that he's hesitating tells you everything about how she's poisoned his potential. Poisoned his potential. We'll work on him, Victoria said. Once the children are settled in school here, it'll be harder for him to imagine moving. And Patricia's money will be even more important then. She'll pay to keep them close to her, even if close means 3,000 miles away. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Victoria. I learned from the best. They laughed again, and I heard the clink of glasses. Wine, probably. More of the wine I'd bought them, drunk while planning how to extract more from the woman they'd just called unpoisoned, unbreeding, unteachable. I crept back down the stairs on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. In the basement, I sat on the bed I'd been assigned and stared at the wall for a long time. $42 million. I was worth $42 million and some change, and to these people, I was nothing but an ATM with inconvenient emotions. The next morning, I came upstairs early. 6:30 a.m. The house was still quiet except for the coffee maker, which had been programmed to start brewing at 6:15. Victoria's touch, she liked her routines automated. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen island, waiting. Jason appeared first, looking rumpled and half asleep. He startled when he saw me. Mom, you're up early. Couldn't sleep. He poured his own coffee, studied me with something that might have been concern. Listen, about last night. Margaret can be a lot, I know. She doesn't mean. I'm going home today. The words came out before I'd fully decided to say them, but once they were in the air, they felt right. Like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. What? Mom, you just got here. And I've seen enough. Seen enough of what? Victoria appeared in the doorway, silk robe perfectly tied, not a hair out of place even at 6:45 in the morning. Patricia, I hope last night's dinner conversation didn't upset you. Mother can be very direct, but she means well. I looked at my daughter-in-law. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time since that hospital room 6 years ago, when she treated my arrival like an inconvenience. Victoria, can I ask you something? Of course. How much would you say I've given you and Jason over the years? Just a rough estimate. Her smile flickered, just for a moment. That's a strange question. Humor me. I don't. I haven't kept track. Jason handles our finances. I have. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app where I'd been adding numbers in the dark basement hours. $1.2 million, give or take. That includes education, the wedding, the car, the house down payment, the swing set, and approximately $37,000 in various loans and gifts that were never acknowledged or repaid. Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, calculation, and finally, that smooth hostess mask she wore like armor. Patricia, if you're implying that we're not grateful, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I heard your conversation with your mother last night. The mask cracked, just slightly. What conversation? The one where you discussed how to manage me, how to keep me writing checks without giving me any actual authority over my grandchildren's lives. The one where your mother called me unbreeding and said I'd poisoned Jason's potential. Jason had gone pale. Mom, don't. I held up my hand. Don't tell me I misunderstood. Don't tell me there's context. Don't tell me she didn't mean it the way it sounded. I know exactly what I heard. Victoria recovered quickly. I had to give her that. Patricia, I'm sorry if our private conversation upset you, but you have to understand, you were eavesdropping. That's hardly. I was walking to the bathroom, in the house my money helped buy, and I heard my daughter-in-law and her mother planning how to extract more money from me while keeping me at arm's length from my own grandchildren. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Victoria. I stood, suddenly tired of this kitchen, this house, these people who smiled while they sharpened their knives. What's not fair is giving everything to a family that treats me like a necessary evil. What's not fair is driving 18 hours to see grandchildren who are being taught that I'm less than their other grandmother because I worked for my money instead of inheriting it. Mom, please. Jason stepped forward, his hands out like he was approaching a wild animal. Let's sit down and talk about this. We can work it out. How? By continuing to pretend, by accepting whatever crumbs Victoria decides to throw me while her mother gets the guest suite and the seat next to my grandchildren at dinner. It wasn't. It was exactly that, Jason. And the worst part is, you let it happen. You sat there and said nothing. Just like you said nothing when they sent me to eat in the basement. Just like you say nothing every time your wife or her family treats me like an embarrassment they have to tolerate. His face crumbled. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who'd cried when his goldfish died. The one I'd held and comforted and promised that everything would be okay. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He was a man who'd chosen his wife's family over his own mother, again and again, until choosing became automatic. I'll get my bags, I said. Tell Emma and Lucas I love them. Tell them Grandma Pat had to go home early. Mom, wait. But I was already walking toward the basement stairs, toward the guest room that had never really been meant for guests at all. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice, low and controlled. Let her go, Jason. She'll calm down. She always does. Always does. Because I always had. Because every time they'd pushed me away, I'd come crawling back for another chance to be heard again. Not this time. I was loading my suitcase into the car when Emma came running out in her pajamas, Lucas trailing behind her. Grandma Pat, where are you going? I knelt down on the driveway, the morning sun warm on my back, and hugged her so tightly she laughed. I have to go home, sweetheart, but I'll see you soon, okay? But you just got here. You didn't even see my room. I know. I'm sorry. Lucas hung back, watching with those serious eyes that saw too much. Is it because of what Grandmother Hayes said, about your car being dirty? No, baby, it's grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Mommy says Grandmother Hayes is always right. The words were innocent. A child repeating what he'd been taught, the same way children repeat everything they hear. But they cut deeper than anything Victoria or Margaret had said. Grandma Pat is going to miss you so much. I kissed both of them on their foreheads, inhaling the sweet child smell of their hair, memorizing the weight of them in my arms. Be good for your mom and dad, okay? And remember, I love you more than anything in the whole world. Victoria appeared on the porch, arms crossed. Emma, Lucas, come inside. It's cold. It was 63 degrees. A perfect September morning. But they obeyed, because children always obey. And I watched them disappear into the house that my money had bought, but my presence would never be welcome in. Jason stood by my car, looking lost. Mom, please, don't leave like this. How should I leave, Jason? With a smile and a promise to come back for more of the same. We can fix this. I'll talk to Victoria, to Margaret. Things will be different next time. There won't be a next time. His face went gray. What does that mean? I opened my car door, then turned back to face him one last time.
It means I'm done, Jason, done being your emergency fund.
Done being your excuse for why you can't take a job in Connecticut. Done being the grandmother who gets the basement while Margaret Hayes gets everything else. You can't just. I can. I'm your mother, not your bank. And until you learn the difference, we have nothing else to say to each other. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. If I had looked, I might have seen Jason standing in the driveway for a long time, watching me go. But I couldn't afford to see that. Not if I wanted to keep driving. The drive back to Portland took 19 hours. I stopped once for gas in Spokane, once for coffee in Pendleton, and didn't cry until I crossed the Columbia River and saw the familiar outline of Mount Hood rising against the October sky. Then I pulled into a rest stop and sobbed for 45 minutes straight. Not for myself. Not for the money or the disrespect or the years I'd wasted trying to earn a place in my son's life. I cried for Emma and Lucas. For the grandmother-grandchild relationship that had been poisoned before it ever had a chance to grow. For birthday parties I'd never attend and school plays I'd never see, and the slow, inevitable forgetting that happens when children don't see someone for months, then years, then ever again. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. My house smelled stale. The way houses do when they've been closed up for days. I dropped my suitcase in the hallway, poured myself 3 fingers of scotch, and sat on my back porch in the dark, listening to the silence. This was my life now. This quiet. This emptiness. A 64-year-old woman with $42 million, and no one to share it with. The first week was the hardest. I kept reaching for my phone to check for photos of the twins, then remembering that Victoria controlled their Instagram, and probably wouldn't be posting anything for my benefit anymore. I caught myself planning Christmas gifts, then wondering if I'd even be allowed to send them. I woke up at 3 a.m. from dreams where Emma was calling for me, and I couldn't find her, couldn't reach her, couldn't do anything but stand in an endless hallway full of locked doors. David would have known what to say. David always knew. But David was gone, and I was alone. And the only person who called me that entire week was my financial advisor, confirming a quarterly dividend deposit of $847,000. Money. Always money. As if money could fill the space where family should be. On day 8, I forced myself back into routine. Morning yoga with the sunrise. Coffee on the porch. 3 hours of work for the nonprofits I served, reviewing grant applications and budget proposals. Lunch with Rosa Chen, my oldest friend from the business world, who'd sold her restaurant chain the same year I'd sold the firm. "You look terrible," Rosa said, stirring her miso soup with the bluntness that 30 years of friendship had earned her. "Thank you. Very helpful. What happened in New York?" I told her. All of it. The basement room and the dinner table exile and the overheard conversation and the drive away from my grandchildren. Rosa listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. "And you haven't heard from Jason since?" "Nothing." "The wife?" "Nothing." Rosa set down her spoon. "Patricia, I'm going to say something, and you're not going to like it. When has that ever stopped you? This is good. What you did, walking away, it's the right thing. Maybe the first right thing you've done with that family in years." I stared at her. "I abandoned my grandchildren. You removed yourself from a toxic situation. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels exactly the same." Rosa reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm from the soup bowl, strong from decades of kitchen work before she'd become too successful to cook anymore. "My mother had a saying," she said quietly. "You cannot water a garden that someone else has salted. No matter how much you pour in, nothing will grow." That's depressing. It's realistic. You gave that family everything. Money, time, love, sacrifice. And what did they give you? A basement room and a seat across from your grandchildren instead of beside them. But Emma and Lucas will grow up learning whatever their mother teaches them. And if their mother teaches them that you're disposable, that your worth is measured in checks you write, then that's what they'll believe. Unless what? Rosa's eyes were sharp, the eyes of a woman who'd built a fortune from nothing and fought every step of the way. Unless you show them something different. Unless you teach them that people have value beyond what they can be used for. And you can't teach them that if you keep letting their parents use you. I sat with that for a long moment, watching the lunch crowd flow around us. Young professionals on their break, mothers with strollers. A couple who looked about the age David and I had been when we opened the firm. leaning close together over shared appetizers, their whole lives ahead of them. So what do I do?
You wait, Rosa said. You live your life. You let them feel the absence of you, not just your money, but you.
And when they come crawling back, and they will, you make them earn their place in your life, instead of assuming they're entitled to it.
That sounds like revenge. It sounds like boundaries. There's a difference. October became November.
The trees in my backyard dropped their leaves,
and I raked them myself because the physical work felt better than sitting still. I accepted 2 new board positions. I started volunteering at a literacy center downtown, teaching adults to read.
I had dinner with Rosa every Thursday and with my cousin Ming every other Sunday. I built a life. A quiet one, smaller than before, but mine. And I heard nothing from New York. No calls from Jason. No texts from Victoria. No cards or drawings from Emma and Lucas, though their birthday had passed in October, and I'd sent gifts. Carefully chosen, extravagantly wrapped, that were never acknowledged. The silence was its own kind of answer. On November 17th, exactly 2 months after I'd driven away from Scarsdale, my phone rang with a New York area code. Not Jason's number. Not Victoria's. Unknown. I answered anyway. Hello, Mrs. Chen. This is Bradley Morrison. I'm the head of lower school at Rye Country Day. My heart stuttered. Is something wrong with Emma and Lucas? No, nothing like that. The children are fine. A pause. I'm calling about a financial matter. I understand this is somewhat irregular, but I'm hoping you might be able to help. What kind of financial matter? The tuition deposit for Emma and Lucas's enrollment next fall. It was due on November 1st. We've sent several reminders to Mr. and Mrs. Chen, but we haven't received payment, and frankly, the family has been unresponsive to our calls. I did quick math in my head. Rye Country Day, $47,000 per student annually. Deposit would be around 10%, so roughly $9,000. Plus fees and supplies. And you're calling me because you're listed as the emergency contact and secondary financial guarantor on the enrollment application. Of course I was. Victoria had planned this from the beginning, using my name as a backup, assuming I'd cover whatever they couldn't afford. Mr. Morrison, I need you to understand something. I am not responsible for my son and daughter-in-law's financial obligations. I was not consulted about being listed as a guarantor, and I do not authorize any charges to my accounts. Silence on the other end. Then, I see. That's certainly you're right, Mrs. Chen. May I ask, should we remove you from the enrollment documents entirely? Yes, please do. And the tuition deposit is not my responsibility. If Jason and Victoria want their children in your school, they can pay for it themselves. I heard Bradley Morrison swallow. I understand. Thank you for clarifying. Mr. Morrison, one more thing. Yes, when you contact my son about this, please don't mention that we spoke. I prefer to stay out of it. Of course, Mrs. Chen, discretion is something we take very seriously at Rye Country Day. We hung up, and I sat very still for a long time, staring at my phone. $9,000. They couldn't cover a $9,000 deposit for their children's school. What had happened to their income? Jason made good money as an associate at his firm. $210,000 a year, last I'd heard. Victoria had her brand management job, another $90,000 or so. Combined, they should have had more than enough for private school tuition, even without my help. Unless they'd built their entire lifestyle around the assumption that my money would always be there. The second call came 3 days later. This time, it was a number I recognized. Jason. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Mom. His voice was strained, thin. I've been trying to reach you. Have you? I haven't received any calls. I know. I kept starting to dial, and then, he trailed off. Listen, can we talk? Really talk. Not just, what about, Jason? About everything. About what happened in September. About how to fix things. Is this about the school tuition? A long pause. How do you know about that? The admissions office called me. Apparently, I'm listed as a financial guarantor on Emma and Lucas's enrollment. Mom, that was Victoria's idea. I didn't even know she'd done it until they called you asking for money you don't have. Silence. I could hear him breathing, could almost see him in whatever room he was pacing, loosening his tie, running his fingers through his hair the way he'd done since childhood when he was stressed. "Mom, we're in trouble."
What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. Serious financial trouble. His voice cracked. The mortgage payment is due next week, and we can't. Can't what? We can't cover it. Not this month.
Maybe not next month either. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at my garden, David's garden, the roses I'd somehow kept alive through 3 seasons of grief. "Jason, what happened to your savings?"
What savings? A bitter laugh. Mom, we never had savings. Everything went to the house, the cars, the lifestyle Victoria's family expected us to maintain. I thought.
We thought. You thought I'd always be there to fill in the gaps. Yes. The admission came out like a confession. Yes, we did. And I know that's wrong. I know that now. But Mom, Emma and Lucas shouldn't suffer because Victoria and I made mistakes.
Shouldn't they? Mom, I'm serious, Jason. Why shouldn't they experience consequences?
Why should I protect them from the results of their parents' choices? Because they're children. Because they're your grandchildren. Grandchildren I'm not allowed to see.
Grandchildren whose mother put me in the basement while her mother slept in the room I paid for.
Grandchildren who are being taught that I'm less than their other grandmother because my money came from work instead of inheritance. I'll talk to Victoria. I'll make things different. I swear, Mom, if you just help us get through this. No. The word hung in the air between us, 3,000 miles of telephone wire carrying its weight.
No? No, Jason. I'm not going to rescue you, not this time. Mom, please.
The mortgage is $4,200.
1 month. That's all I'm asking. Just until I can figure something out. And after that month, what then? Victoria's shopping habits don't magically disappear. Her parents' expectations don't vanish.
You'll be back next month, and the month after, and we'll be right back where we started. Me writing checks while your wife treats me like an inconvenience.
It won't be like that. I promise. Your promises don't mean anything anymore, Jason.
Not after September.
I heard him start to cry. My son, 33 years old, weeping into the phone like the child he'd once been. Mom, I'm so sorry. For all of it.
For the way Victoria talked about you. For the way her family treated you. For not standing up when I should have. I was a coward. I am a coward. But please don't punish Emma and Lucas for my failures. My heart ached.
Every maternal instinct screamed at me to fix this, to write the check, to make his pain go away the way I'd made every pain go away since he was born. But Rosa's voice echoed in my head. You cannot water a garden that someone else has salted. Jason, I love you. I will always love you. But love doesn't mean enabling. And right now, the kindest thing I can do is let you figure this out yourself. How? How am I supposed to figure out a $4,200 mortgage payment in 7 days? I don't know.
But you're a smart man with an expensive education. You'll find a way.
And if I don't, if we lose the house, then you'll learn something about what really matters, about which relationships are worth maintaining and which ones are bleeding you dry.
You mean Victoria. I mean everyone who's taught you that people exist to be used. Your wife. Her parents. And yes, son. Me, too. I taught you that money fixes everything. That love means always saying yes.
I was wrong. I'm trying to be right now. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, I don't know if I can do this, Mom. You can.
You're stronger than you think. Stronger than they've made you believe. Will you at least think about it? About helping us? I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't change my mind. But Jason, whatever happens next, don't contact me through intermediaries. Don't have Victoria's family call me. If you want a relationship with your mother, you come to me directly, honestly, without asking for money first. Understood. Understood. Goodbye, Jason. Goodbye, Mom. I love you. I love you too. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine with hands that shook only slightly. 7 days until their mortgage was due.
7 days to see what my son was really made of. On November 28th, Thanksgiving Day, I had dinner at Rosa's house with her extended family. 3 generations of Chens, none of them related to me by blood, all of them treating me like I belonged. Her grandchildren climbed on my lap and showed me their toys. Her daughter asked about my garden. Her son-in-law poured me wine and told me stories about his restaurant's worst customers until I laughed so hard my sides hurt.
This was family. This was what it was supposed to feel like. My phone stayed silent in my purse all evening. No calls from Jason. No texts. No news about whether they'd made the mortgage payment, or lost the house, or figured out some other solution. Just silence. But when I got home that night, there was an email waiting. From Victoria. Subject: We need to talk. I poured myself a scotch and opened it. Patricia, I know you're angry with me. I understand why, but we need to discuss this situation like adults, without emotion clouding our judgment. The children are asking about you. Emma cries every night because Grandma Pat isn't calling anymore. Lucas has started acting out at school. Whatever issues exist between us, they shouldn't affect innocent children. I'm proposing a meeting. Neutral territory. You choose the location. We can discuss terms for your continued involvement in Emma and Lucas's lives. And yes, we can discuss the financial realities of raising children in today's economy. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for partnership. Surely that's something you can understand, given your business background. Victoria. I read it 3 times. Terms. She wanted to negotiate terms for letting me see my grandchildren. Like visitation was a business deal. Like my love for Emma and Lucas was something to be bargained and traded. And underneath the professional language, the threat was clear: pay up, or you'll never see them again. My finger hovered over the reply button. Then I closed the email, finished my scotch, and went to bed. Let her wait. Let them both wait. I'd spent 5 years dancing to their tune. Now it was time to compose my own music. I made Victoria wait 5 days before responding. 5 days of silence while her email sat in my inbox, its calculated coldness burning a hole in my conscience every time I saw the notification. 5 days of wondering whether Emma really was crying for me, or if that was just another manipulation designed to soften my resolve. On December 3rd, I finally replied. Victoria, I'll meet with you. Seattle, the Fairmont Olympic. December 10th at 2 p.m., come alone. Patricia, no greeting, no sign-off. Nothing but the bare facts. Her response came within 7 minutes. I'll be there. The week before the meeting, I did something I should have done years ago. I hired a forensic accountant. His name was Gerald Fitch, 61 years old, former IRS investigator, now in private practice specializing in what he delicately called family financial disputes. Rosa had recommended him after her cousin's divorce, where he'd uncovered 3 hidden bank accounts in a shell company in the Caymans. What exactly are you looking for, Mrs. Chen? Gerald asked during our first meeting, his pen poised over a yellow legal pad. I want to know where my money went. You mentioned approximately $1.2 million in support over the years. That's a significant sum. Do you have documentation? I slid a folder across his desk. Bank statements, wire transfer receipts, credit card records. The same evidence I'd been compiling in my basement room in Scarsdale, now organized with the precision of someone who'd spent 40 years making numbers tell stories. Gerald flipped through the pages, his eyebrows rising incrementally with each document. This is thorough. I'm an accountant, was an accountant. Old habits. May I ask why you're doing this now? Some of these transfers date back over a decade. I thought about how to answer, about Victoria's email and Jason's desperate phone call, and the grandchildren I might never see again. Because I need to understand, I finally said. I need to know if I was being generous or being stupid. And I need to know who else was involved. Who else? My daughter-in-law's family, the Hayes family from Greenwich. They've been present throughout my son's marriage. I want to know exactly how present. Gerald nodded slowly, making notes. I'll need access to any joint accounts, mortgage documents, property records, anything you can provide. What if I can't provide everything? Some of the accounts are in my son's name only. Then I'll find other ways. Public records, credit reports. There are always trails, Mrs. Chen. Money doesn't disappear, it just moves. And movement leaves footprints. I wrote him a check for his retainer, $15,000, and left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. December 10th arrived gray and cold, Seattle wrapped in its winter uniform of low clouds and persistent drizzle. I checked into the Fairmont at noon, giving myself time to settle my nerves before Victoria appeared. The hotel lobby gleamed with old money elegance, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, the kind of understated luxury that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. I chose a table in the corner of the Georgian room, ordered tea I didn't intend to drink, and waited. Victoria arrived at 2:07 p.m., 7 minutes late. A power move, probably, designed to establish dominance. She looked tired. That was my first thought. Tired in a way that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. Dark circles under her eyes. A tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there in September. Whatever financial stress they were under, it was starting to show. Patricia. She slid into the chair across from me, signaling the waiter for coffee. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You said we needed to talk. So talk. No pleasantries. No small talk about the weather or her flight from New York. We were past that now. Victoria took a moment to arrange her napkin, her coffee cup, her expression. Buying time. Preparing her pitch. First, I want to apologize for what you overheard in September. The conversation with my mother, it wasn't meant. It wasn't meant to be heard. I understand. But it was meant. She flinched. Barely perceptible, but I'd spent 40 years reading people across negotiating tables. I knew a hit when I landed one. My mother has strong opinions. Not all of them reflect my views. Which part didn't reflect your views, Victoria? The part about managing me. The part about keeping me writing checks while denying me authority over my grandchildren. Or the part where she called me unbreeding and said I'd poison Jason's potential. The coffee arrived. Victoria stirred in cream with mechanical precision, her eyes fixed on the swirling liquid. I'm not going to defend everything that was said, but you have to understand our position. Raising children in our social circle. The expectations are enormous. The schools, the activities, the appearances we have to maintain. It's not as simple as just living within our means. Why not? Because means are relative. The families we associate with, the Hayes family, their friends, the people Jason needs to impress for his career, they have standards. If Emma and Lucas don't attend the right schools, don't wear the right clothes, don't summer in the right places, they'll be excluded. Marginalized. Is that what you want for your grandchildren? I want my grandchildren to know their grandmother, something your standards have apparently prevented. Victoria set down her spoon. That's what I want to discuss. A new arrangement. What kind of arrangement? She reached into her bag and produced a folder, leather, embossed with her initials. Inside, a typed document that looked disturbingly like a contract. I've put together a proposal, a framework for your involvement in Emma and Lucas's lives going forward. I didn't touch the folder. Summarize it. Financial support would continue at the previous level, $2,800 monthly toward the mortgage, plus contributions to education, healthcare, and enrichment activities as needed. In exchange, you would receive guaranteed visitation rights, 1 week at Christmas, 1 week in summer, and monthly video calls with the children. I almost laughed. Almost. You're offering me 2 weeks a year with my grandchildren in exchange for $33,000 annually, plus contributions as needed, which I assume means whenever you decide you need a new kitchen or Victoria's Secret wardrobe. That's not. What's the enforcement mechanism, Victoria? What happens if I send the money and you decide my visits are inconvenient again? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. We would put it in writing. A formal agreement. Enforceable how? In court. You want me to sue my own son for visitation rights? It wouldn't come to that. It already has come to that. That's why we're sitting here negotiating like opposing counsel instead of family. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Patricia, I'm trying to find a solution. I'm trying to build a bridge. What do you want me to do? I leaned forward, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her lean back. I want to know the truth. All of it. Starting with this. Where did all my money actually go? What do you mean? It went to the house, the children. Your mortgage payment is $4,200 a month. I was sending $2,800. That leaves $1,400 for you and Jason to cover from your combined income of over $300,000 a year. Plus you had no student loans because I paid those off. No car payments because I bought both your cars. So where did the rest go? Victoria's face went still. The careful mask of negotiation sliding into something harder, warier. Our expenses are complex. Then uncomplicate them. Because from where I'm sitting, you should have been banking $50,000 a year minimum. Instead, you can't make a single mortgage payment without calling me in a panic. Jason's firm cut bonuses this year. The economy. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't lie to me, Victoria. I've spent 40 years catching financial lies professionally. I know what your husband makes. I know what you make. And I know that the math doesn't add up unless money is going somewhere you don't want me to see. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. I don't know what you're implying, Victoria said finally, her voice cold. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly, where is the money? That's none of your business. You made it my business when you asked me to keep funding a lifestyle you apparently can't afford. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. This meeting was a mistake. I came here in good faith to try to repair our relationship, and you're treating me like a suspect. Sit down. Something in my voice made her pause. Sit down, Victoria. We're not finished. She sat. Reluctantly, her jaw tight, but she said, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want the truth. What happened to the money? I told you. Your mother, Margaret. How much have you been sending her? The color drained from Victoria's face so fast I thought she might faint. How did you? I didn't. Not for certain, but I do now. The story came out in pieces, reluctant, defensive. But once the first crack appeared, the rest followed like a dam giving way. Margaret Hayes wasn't as wealthy as she appeared. The Greenwich estate, mortgaged to the hilt. The summer house in Martha's Vineyard, sold 3 years ago, though they still told friends they were renovating. Cody's banking career had ended not in retirement, but in a quiet dismissal after a compliance violation that the family had managed to keep out of the papers. The Hayes family was broke, had been broke for years, and Victoria had been helping them maintain the illusion with money that was supposed to go toward her own household. How much? I asked, my voice deadly calm. I don't know exactly. Victoria. Maybe $200,000. Over the past 4 years. $200,000. My money, filtered through my son's household, ending up in the pockets of people who'd look down their noses at me while eating at my expense. Did Jason know? Some of it, not all of it. He thought we were just helping with occasional expenses. He didn't know about the monthly transfers. Monthly transfers. $3,500. Every month. To cover mother's credit cards and the minimum payments on the estate mortgage. $3,500 a month. For 4 years. That was $168,000 right there, and she'd said there was more. So let me understand this correctly. I heard my voice as if from a great distance, controlled but barely. I was sending you $2,800 a month to help with your mortgage. You were sending your mother $3,500 a month to help with hers. Which means my money wasn't supporting my grandchildren. It was supporting the lifestyle of people who called me classless and unbreeding. Victoria said nothing. And the $800,000 I gave you for the down payment on your house. How much of that actually went to the down payment? All of it. Victoria. Her eyes dropped. We only needed $600,000. The rest went to my parents. They were about to lose the estate. There would have been headlines. It would have destroyed our family's reputation. $200,000. Skimmed right off the top of my gift. Redirected to people who despised me, who'd worked actively to keep me away from my grandchildren, who'd planted newspaper stories calling me mentally unstable. And the swing set, the furniture, the emergency loans over the years. How much of that went to Connecticut? I can't give you exact figures. Try. Maybe another $100,000. Over time. I didn't keep track. It was just, family helping family. Family helping family. The phrase hung in the air like a bad joke. So when you add it all up, the skimmed down payment, the monthly transfers, the emergency loans, we're talking about $500,000. Possibly more. My money, Victoria, given to you and Jason in good faith. Stolen to prop up your parents' failing lifestyle. It wasn't stealing. You gave it to us. How we chose to spend it was a betrayal of everything that gift was meant for. I stood up, gathering my coat and purse with hands that trembled with rage I refused to show. Patricia, wait. What about the children? What about our arrangement? I turned back to look at her. This woman I'd tried so hard to accept as family, who'd smiled to my face while picking my pocket for her parents' benefit. There is no arrangement, Victoria. There never was. You came here to negotiate for money, using my grandchildren as leverage. But you've made a critical miscalculation. What's that? You've shown me exactly who you are, and now I know exactly what I'm dealing with. I walked out of the Georgian room without looking back. Behind me, I heard Victoria call my name once, then fall silent. In my hotel room, I called Gerald Fitch.
I need you to expand the investigation, I said. The Hayes family. Cody and Margaret Hayes. Greenwich, Connecticut.
I want to know everything. Their debts, their assets, their financial history for the past 10 years. That's going to require some additional resources. Whatever it costs. May I ask what changed? I looked out the window at Seattle's gray skyline,
thinking about $500,000 flowing from my accounts to people who'd worked to exclude me from my own family. I just found out where the money went, Gerald. Now I want to know how to get it back. Gerald Fitch called me on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. Mrs. Chen, I need to see you in person. There are things I found that shouldn't be discussed over the phone. I drove to his office through Portland's holiday traffic, past houses strung with lights and shopping centers packed with last-minute buyers. Everyone rushing towards celebration while I rushed towards something else entirely. Gerald's office was in a modest building on Hawthorne, sandwiched between a yoga studio and an organic bakery. Nothing about its exterior suggested the kind of secrets that got uncovered inside. Thank you for coming so quickly. He ushered me into a conference room where folders were spread across the table like evidence in a trial. I've completed the preliminary investigation, and frankly, Mrs. Chen, what I found is worse than either of us anticipated. I sat down slowly, bracing myself. Show me. Gerald opened the first folder, revealing a timeline that stretched back nearly a decade. Let's start with the Hayes family finances. Cody Hayes was terminated from First National Bank in 2017, not retired, as they've claimed publicly. The official reason was compliance concerns, but my sources indicate he was caught facilitating questionable transfers for a client who turned out to be under federal investigation. Money laundering? Nothing that direct, more like willful blindness. He didn't ask questions he should have asked, probably because the client was paying him personally for his discretion. The bank settled quietly, and Cody walked away with a modest severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. How modest? $340,000, which sounds like a lot until you realize he was spending approximately $28,000 a month maintaining their lifestyle. I did the math automatically. 12 months of runway, maybe 14 if they'd cut back. But people like the Hayes family didn't cut back. They doubled down. So they were broke within a year. Within 8 months, actually. By early 2018, they'd maxed out 6 credit cards and taken a second mortgage on the Greenwich estate. Margaret tried to sell some jewelry, a necklace that had been in her family for generations, but the auction house discovered it was fake. A very good fake, but fake nonetheless. Apparently, the original had been quietly sold years earlier. They'd been pretending to have money they don't have. For at least a decade, yes, the summer house, the club memberships, the charity galas, all financed by debt that kept compounding. By the time Victoria married your son, her parents owed approximately $1.2 million to various creditors. The same amount I'd given Jason and Victoria over the years. Coincidence? I didn't believe in those anymore. Which brings us to the interesting part. Gerald opened a second folder. The money trail from your accounts to theirs. You were right about the diverted funds, but the structure was more sophisticated than simple skimming. He spread a series of bank statements across the table, lines highlighted in yellow and pink. Victoria set up an LLC in 2019. Chen Family Holdings. On paper, it looked like a vehicle for managing household expenses and investments. In practice, it was a pass-through for funds going to Connecticut. An LLC. Your son is listed as the registered agent, but I doubt he knows it exists. The signature on the formation documents doesn't match his handwriting samples from other records. Victoria forged it. I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was seeing. She created a fake company in my son's name to funnel my money to her parents. That's the cleanest interpretation. Yes. What's the less clean interpretation? Gerald hesitated. There's evidence that some funds passing through Chen Family Holdings didn't go to the Hayes family at all. Approximately $67,000 over the past 3 years went to an account in the Caymans. Whose account? I'm still working on that. Cayman banking secrecy is formidable. But the timing of the transfers correlates with periods when Victoria told your son they were facing unexpected expenses. Medical bills, car repairs, home maintenance emergencies. Phantom expenses.
Exactly. She was creating crises, getting you to send money to solve them, then diverting a portion to this offshore account while the rest went to her parents. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched. The scale of deception was staggering, not just ingratitude, not just using me, but active, calculated theft wrapped in the disguise of family. There's more, Gerald said quietly. More? He opened a third folder. Inside were printouts of text messages, dozens of them, between Victoria and Margaret. I should explain how I obtained these. Victoria's phone was backed up to a cloud service with a password that turned out to be her wedding anniversary. Not exactly Fort Knox. These conversations span the past 2 years. Is this legal? It's in a gray area. I'd recommend not using them in any formal legal proceeding, but for understanding what you're dealing with, he pushed the folder toward me. I think you need to read them. I took the folder home and spent Christmas Eve reading. The texts were organized chronologically, starting in January 2022, right around the time I'd sold Chen and Associates and suddenly became worth $42 million. Margaret, have you talked to Jason about the inheritance yet? Victoria, not directly. He gets defensive when I bring up his mother's money. Margaret, he needs to understand that money belongs in our family. His mother is nobody. She got lucky with a calculator and some tax loopholes. That doesn't make her our equal. Victoria, I know. I'm working on it. The house purchase is the first step. Once we have her money tied up in property, she can't take it back. Margaret, smart girl. Your father was the same way with his clients. Once you get hooks in, you keep pulling. I set down the printout, my hands shaking. Hooks. They'd seen the house down payment not as a gift but as a hook. A way to trap me into ongoing financial obligation. The messages continued through the spring and summer, documenting Victoria's strategy with clinical precision. Victoria. She agreed to the swing set. Another $14,000 secured. Margaret. Excellent. What's next? Victoria. I'm thinking about the basement renovation. We can turn the guest room into a wellness space for the children. She'll pay to make room for her own displacement. Margaret. Poetic. Make sure you frame it as an investment in Emma and Lucas's development. She can't resist anything that sounds like it's for the grandchildren. For the grandchildren. Every manipulation dressed up as concern for Emma and Lucas. Every extracted dollar justified by invoking children who'd been nothing but leverage from the beginning. September's messages were the worst. Margaret, is everything ready for our visit? Victoria, almost. I've put Patricia in the basement. Jason thinks it's because your back can't handle stairs, but really, I just don't want her breathing the same air as the rest of us. Margaret, she's going to make things difficult, I can feel it. Victoria, let her. The more difficult she is, the easier it'll be to cut her out completely. Jason's almost ready to choose. I just need one more incident to push him over. Margaret, create one if you have to. Your father's newspaper friend is on standby. I stared at that message for a long time. Create one if you have to. The whole airport abandonment story, the newspaper article, the public attack on my reputation. It had been planned before I'd even left their driveway, before I'd overheard their conversation, before any of it. They'd been manufacturing my villainy while bleeding me dry. The final messages were from early December, after my meeting with Victoria in Seattle. Victoria, she knows about the money going to you and Dad. Margaret, how much does she know? Victoria, the monthly transfers, the skim down payment. She doesn't know about the LLC or the Cayman account. Margaret, thank God. If she finds out about that, we're finished. Victoria, what do I do? She's not going to help us anymore. The mortgage is 3 months behind. The school won't enroll the kids without payment. Everything is falling apart. Margaret, then we accelerate the timeline. Your father has been talking to the lawyers about options. Victoria, what kind of options? Margaret, the kind that require Jason to choose between his mother and his wife. Formally, legally. Victoria, you mean? Margaret, I mean it's time to stop playing nice. If Patricia won't give us the money willingly, we take it through Jason. He's entitled to his inheritance. That's community property once it passes to Victoria, but she's not dead. She could live another 30 years. Margaret, then we encourage him to ask for an advance. An early distribution. Surely a mother who loves her son would want to help him avoid financial ruin. Victoria, and if she says no, Margaret. Then we make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of grandmother abandons her grandchildren over money. The newspaper story was just the beginning. We have photos. We have recordings. We have 5 years of Patricia Chen proving she cares more about control than family. Victoria, what recordings? Margaret, every conversation she's ever had in our presence. Every moment she lost her temper or said something regrettable. Your father's been collecting them since the wedding. Insurance, he called it, just in case we ever needed leverage. I read that exchange 3 times, each reading making my blood run colder. Recordings. They've been recording me for years. Every family dinner, every holiday, every private moment. Captured without my knowledge, curated for maximum damage. The newspaper article hadn't been revenge for the airport incident. It had been the first shot in a war they've been preparing for since before my grandchildren were born. I called Rosa at midnight on Christmas Eve. Patricia, is everything okay? No. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. No, everything is very far from okay. But I know what I'm dealing with now. And I know what I need to do. What did you find? I told her. All of it. The LLC, the offshore account, the forged signatures, the recorded conversations, the premeditated campaign to extract my money while destroying my reputation. Rosa listened in silence until I finished. These people are criminals, Patricia. Actual criminals. You need to go to the police. Maybe. Eventually. But first, I need something else. What? I need my son to see who he married. Really see, without me telling him. Because if I just present this evidence, Victoria will spin it. She'll make me the villain again. The jealous mother trying to destroy his marriage. He needs to discover it himself. How do you make that happen? I looked out my window at the Christmas lights twinkling on my neighbor's house. Somewhere in New York, Emma and Lucas were probably sleeping, dreaming of presents and Santa Claus and all the magic that children believe in before the world teaches them better. Victoria mentioned something in Seattle. Jason thought they were just helping with occasional expenses. He didn't know about the monthly transfers to Connecticut. He didn't know about the LLC. You think he's innocent in all this? I think he's been a fool and a coward, but I don't think he's a thief. And I think when he finds out what his wife has been doing with his name and his mother's money, he's going to have a very different perspective on his marriage. So what's the plan? Gerald found something else during his investigation. Victoria's been sloppy with the Chen family holdings paperwork. There are filings that should have been made but weren't. Tax documents that don't exist. The IRS has started sending notices to the registered address, which is Jason's office. She's going to get him in trouble with the IRS. She already has. He just doesn't know it yet. Those notices have been getting intercepted by Victoria for months. But Gerald has copies now. Official copies that need to go to the registered agent. You're going to send them to Jason. I'm going to hand-deliver them. On New Year's Day, with Gerald present to explain exactly what his wife has done. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. That's going to destroy his marriage, Patricia. His marriage is built on lies and theft. Better destroyed than continued. And the children, Emma and Lucas. My throat tightened. They're the reason I'm doing this carefully instead of just calling the FBI. I want custody arrangements in place before Victoria realizes how much trouble she's in. I want my grandchildren protected. From their own mother, from everyone who's been using them as pawns in a game they never asked to play. I heard Rosa exhale slowly. You've really thought this through. I've had 3 months with nothing to do but think. And now I'm done thinking. Now I'm ready to act. Merry Christmas, Patricia. Merry Christmas, Rosa. I'll call you after New Year's. I hung up and looked at the folder of evidence spread across my kitchen table. Bank records. Forged documents. Text messages dripping with contempt for everything I'd built and everyone I'd loved. Tomorrow was Christmas. A day for family, for forgiveness, for peace on earth and goodwill toward men. But December 26th was coming. And then January 1st. And then the Hayes family would learn what happened when you declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight back. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to Maria's photo. They picked the wrong woman to underestimate, David, I said to the empty room. They really, truly did. The week between Christmas and New Year's was the longest of my life. I spent it preparing. Meeting with lawyers. 3 different firms, each specializing in different aspects of what was about to unfold. family law, financial fraud, civil litigation.
By December 30th, I had a team assembled that would have made a Fortune 500 company nervous.
Mrs. Chen, I have to be direct with you. That was Sandra Okonkwo, the family law specialist, a Nigerian-American woman with 30 years of experience and a reputation for winning ugly custody battles. What you're describing could result in criminal charges against your daughter-in-law. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes to protect my grandchildren, even if it means your son goes down with her. He's the registered agent on that LLC. His name is on documents that may constitute fraud. He didn't know. Victoria forged his signature. Can you prove that? Gerald is working with a handwriting expert. We should have confirmation within the week. Sandra nodded slowly, making notes on her legal pad. And your goal here? Best case scenario? I'd thought about this for days. What did I actually want? Money could be recovered. Reputation could be rebuilt. But some things, once broken, stayed broken forever. I want my grandchildren safe and stable. I want regular, meaningful access to them, not 2 weeks a year negotiated like a hostage exchange. I want Victoria held accountable for what she's done, but not in a way that traumatizes Emma and Lucas. And I want my son to have the chance to be a better man than he's been. That's a lot of wants. I've earned them. Sandra almost smiled. Yes, I believe you have. Here's what I recommend. We approach this in phases. Phase 1 is confronting Jason with the evidence and giving him the opportunity to cooperate. If he does, we move to Phase 2, filing for divorce on his behalf, with custody arrangements that protect the children and include generous grandparent visitation rights. And if he doesn't cooperate, then Phase 3 gets ugly. We report the fraud to appropriate authorities, file civil suits for recovery of your funds, and pursue emergency custody through the courts based on Victoria's demonstrated pattern of deception and financial abuse. Financial abuse? Of you, Mrs. Chen. What Victoria did, systematically extracting money under false pretenses, forging documents, creating fake emergencies, that's not just theft. It's a pattern of abuse targeting a vulnerable family member. I'm not sure I'd call myself vulnerable. You're 64, recently widowed, and your only child was being manipulated to extract your wealth. In the eyes of the court, that's vulnerability. And honestly, Sandra leaned forward, her eyes sharp. It's also leverage. Victoria targeted you because you loved your son and grandchildren. That makes what she did worse, not better. December 31st. New Year's Eve. I was packing for my flight to New York when my phone rang. A Connecticut area code, not one I recognized. Mrs. Chen. This is Harold Wentworth. I'm an attorney representing Cody and Margaret Hayes. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Your son provided it. He thought it might be helpful if we spoke directly, given the complexity of the family situation. What do you want, Mr. Wentworth? To extend an olive branch. My clients are aware that there's been tension between your families. They're also aware that you've hired investigators and legal counsel. They'd like to propose a meeting to discuss a resolution before things escalate further. A resolution. A financial settlement. My clients are prepared to acknowledge certain irregularities in how funds were handled. In exchange for your agreement not to pursue legal action, they're offering a structured repayment plan and a formal apology. I almost laughed. After everything, the theft, the forgery, the recorded conversations, the newspaper attacks, they thought they could buy me off with a payment plan and some empty words. How much? Excuse me. The repayment. How much are they offering? A pause. Papers shuffling. $200,000, paid over 5 years, plus a public statement acknowledging their gratitude for your support of the family. $200,000. Less than half of what Victoria had admitted to diverting. A fraction of what the real total probably was. Mr. Wentworth, let me make something very clear. I'm not interested in a settlement. I'm not interested in a payment plan. And I'm certainly not interested in a public statement that lets your clients save face while pretending they didn't systematically defraud me for years. Mrs. Chen, I strongly advise you to consider. What I'm considering is how many felony charges your clients are exposed to. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, tax evasion. The offshore accounts alone could trigger federal investigation. Silence. Then, carefully, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Then let me educate you. Chen Family Holdings, LLC. Cayman Islands account number ending in 4471. Monthly transfers, disguised as household expenses. Your clients know exactly what I'm referring to, even if they haven't told their lawyer everything. The silence stretched longer this time. I'll relay your position to my clients. You do that. And tell them one more thing. Yes. Tell them I'm coming to New York tomorrow. Tell them that by the end of the week, their daughter's marriage will be over and their access to my family's money will be permanently severed. And tell them that if they try to interfere, if they contact the press, if they attempt any more character assassination, if they so much as whisper my name in a negative context, I will bury them so deep in litigation they'll be selling that Greenwich estate just to pay their legal bills. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something else entirely, something that felt like power. New Year's Day, 11:47 a.m. I stood outside Jason and Victoria's house in Scarsdale, Gerald Fitch beside me, a briefcase full of evidence between us. The Christmas decorations were still up, reeds on the door, lights on the bushes, an inflatable snowman slowly deflating on the lawn. Inside, I could see movement through the windows. The family at home, probably recovering from whatever New Year's Eve celebration they managed despite their financial troubles. Ready? Gerald asked. No, but let's do it anyway. I rang the doorbell. The door opened to reveal Jason, unshaven, wearing sweatpants and a Columbia Law t-shirt that had seen better days. His eyes went wide when he saw me. Mom, what are you? We need to talk, Jason. Now. Is Victoria here? She's upstairs with the kids. Mom, you can't just show up without. This is Gerald Fitch. He's a forensic accountant. He's been investigating your family's finances for the past month, and there are things you need to see. Jason's face went through several expressions: confusion, alarm, anger, before settling on a wary defensiveness. What kind of things? The kind that are going to change everything you think you know about your marriage. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd been banished from Christmas dinner 4 months earlier. Gerald spread documents across the coffee table while Jason watched with growing unease. Let me start with what you think you know, Gerald said, his voice calm and professional. You believe your mother has been helping with mortgage payments and occasional expenses. You believe you and Victoria have been managing your finances responsibly. You believe the current cash flow problems are temporary, caused by bonus cuts and an expensive housing market. That's mostly accurate. It's almost entirely false. Gerald opened the first folder. This is Chen Family Holdings LLC, registered in New York State in 2019. You are listed as the registered agent. Do you recognize this document? Jason leaned forward, frowning. I've never seen this before. That's because you didn't sign it. A handwriting expert has confirmed that this signature is a forgery, almost certainly executed by your wife. The color drained from Jason's face. That's not possible. Victoria wouldn't. Chen Family Holdings received approximately $340,000 in transfers over the past 4 years. Money that came from your mother, passed through your household accounts, and then was redirected through this LLC. Gerald turned to the next document. Here's where it went. The bank statements showed transfer after transfer to accounts in Connecticut, Margaret and Cody Hayes. The Greenwich estate mortgage, credit card payments, country club dues. The paper trail was damning and undeniable. I don't understand, Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria told me we were helping with occasional emergencies, a few thousand here and there. $168,000 in monthly transfers alone, plus approximately $200,000 skimmed from your mother's down payment gift, plus another $67,000 diverted to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Offshore account. We're still investigating that one, but the pattern suggests Victoria has been building a personal safety net. Money hidden from both you and your mother, accessible only to her. Jason's hands were shaking. He looked at me with eyes I barely recognized, not defensive anymore, not wary, lost, like a man watching his entire life collapse in real time. Mom, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know any of this. I believe you. She told me we were struggling because of the economy, because my bonuses got cut. She made me feel guilty for not earning enough, for not being able to provide. His voice cracked. I called you begging for money, Mom. I made you feel like a terrible person for saying no.
And the whole time she was stealing from both of us. Yes. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made us all freeze.
Victoria appeared in the doorway, dressed in silk pajamas and a cashmere robe, her hair perfect, even on New Year's Day morning. She saw me, saw Gerald, saw the documents spread across her coffee table, and her face went very, very still. Patricia, what a surprise. Hello, Victoria. We were just showing Jason some paperwork. Her eyes flicked to the documents, calculating. I see Gerald has been busy. I hope you're not taking any of this at face value, Jason. You know how your mother likes to exaggerate. Chen Family Holdings, Jason said quietly. I'm the registered agent. A technicality. I set it up to manage some investments. I was going to tell you. You forged my signature. That's ridiculous. I would never. The handwriting expert says otherwise. Jason stood up slowly, his movements careful and controlled. Victoria, is there anything you want to tell me before I keep reading? Because I've got a feeling there's a lot more in that briefcase, and I'd rather hear it from you than from a forensic accountant. Victoria's composure cracked, just for a moment. A flash of something desperate and calculating behind her eyes.
Jason, whatever she's told you, you have to understand. I did it for us. For the children. My parents were going to lose everything. Do you know what that would have done to our social standing? To Emma and Lucas's futures. You took $500,000 from my mother. She has $42 million. She wouldn't even notice it missing if she weren't so obsessed with control. She noticed, Victoria. She noticed, and she came to us in good faith, and we put her in the basement while your mother slept in the room her money paid for. That was different. My mother has needs.
Patricia was being difficult. Patricia was being robbed. Jason's voice had gone cold, a voice I'd never heard from him before. By my wife. Using my name. For years. Victoria's eyes darted between us, searching for an angle, a way to spin this.
Jason, please. We can work this out. It's a family matter. We don't need lawyers and accountants making everything worse. Actually, I said quietly, we do. Because this isn't just a family matter anymore. This is fraud.
Multiple counts.
Across state lines, involving forged documents and offshore accounts. The kind of thing that attracts federal attention. Victoria went pale. You wouldn't. I haven't decided yet. That's partly why I'm here.
To see if there's a path forward that doesn't involve prosecutors.
What kind of path? I looked at my son. This man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who was standing in his living room watching his marriage implode.
That depends on Jason. We talked for 3 hours.
Actually, that's not accurate. Gerald presented evidence for 3 hours while Victoria made increasingly desperate attempts to explain, minimize, and deflect.
The Cayman account was for the children's education. The forged signature was a misunderstanding. The monthly transfers to Connecticut were loans that would have been repaid eventually. None of it held up. The documents were too clear, the pattern too consistent. By 3 p.m., Victoria had stopped talking entirely. She sat in the corner of her expensive sofa, arms crossed, staring at the wall with the hollow expression of someone who'd run out of lies.
I need to think, Jason said finally. I need time to process all of this. You have until Friday, I said.
That's when I meet with my lawyers to decide next steps. What are the options?
Option 1. You file for divorce, cooperate fully with recovering my funds, and support a custody arrangement that protects Emma and Lucas while giving me meaningful
access to my grandchildren.
In that scenario, I pursue civil recovery only, no criminal referrals.
And option 2. I treat this as what it legally is, systematic fraud by multiple parties. Your wife, her parents, anyone else who participated.
I let the authorities sort out who gets charged with what. Jason closed his eyes. And me. In option 2, I'd do everything possible to demonstrate you were a victim, not a participant.
But I can't guarantee what prosecutors would conclude. So my choices are divorce my wife, or risk prison. Your choices are take responsibility for fixing this mess, or let someone else decide the consequences. I'm giving you more agency than your wife gave me. He laughed bitterly. Agency. That's one word for it.
Victoria stood abruptly. I'm going to check on the children. Victoria. Jason's voice stopped her at the doorway. Don't pack anything.
Don't take anything. Don't call your parents. We're going to figure this out. But until we do, everything stays exactly where it is. She didn't respond, just walked upstairs with the rigid posture of someone holding themselves together through pure force of will. Gerald left at 4 p.m. to catch his flight back to Portland. I stayed. Jason and I sat in his living room as the winter darkness gathered outside, two people trying to find solid ground after an earthquake. I loved her, he said quietly. I really did. When we met, she was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, ambitious, connected. She made me feel like I could be more than just Patricia Chen's son. And now I don't know who I married. This person in those documents, the forger, the thief, the liar, I don't recognize her. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. How long have you known that something was wrong with her? I suspected from the beginning, but I wanted so badly to be wrong that I ignored every warning sign. I told myself she was just different, that her family had different values, that love would smooth out the rough edges. Love, Jason laughed hollowly. I don't think she knows what that word means. Maybe not, but you do. And so do Emma and Lucas. That's what we have to protect now. How? By making hard choices. By putting the children first, even when it hurts. By being honest even when lying would be easier. I reached across and took his hand. By being the man your father raised you to be, not the man Victoria wanted you to become. He gripped my hand tightly, like a drowning man holding a lifeline. Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For the basement and the dinner table and the years of taking your money while treating you like an inconvenience. For not seeing what was happening right in front of me. I know. Can you forgive me? I thought about all the hurt, all the betrayal, all the nights I'd spent wondering where I'd failed as a mother. I already have. Jason, I forgave you months ago, but forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Trust has to be rebuilt. Where do we start? We start with Friday. We start with you making a choice about what kind of man you want to be. I flew back to Portland that night, leaving my son in a house full of secrets and a marriage built on lies. For days until the deadline. For days to see if blood was really thicker than water, or if Jason would find some way to rationalize staying with the woman who'd robbed us both. I didn't sleep on the plane. I just stared out the window at the darkness below, thinking about Emma and Lucas, about the family we might be able to salvage from this wreckage, about the reckoning that was coming, one way or another. Jason called me on Thursday, January 4th, one day before the deadline. Mom, I need you to come back to New York. What happened? Victoria's gone. She took the kids and left yesterday morning while I was at work. I came home to an empty house and a note. My blood went cold. Where did she take them? Connecticut. Her parents' place. The note said she needed space to think, and that I shouldn't contact her until she's ready to talk. His voice was ragged, exhausted. Mom, I think she's going to run. I think she's going to take Emma and Lucas and disappear. She can't do that. There are laws. She has a passport for herself and the kids. She got them last year. Said it was for a family trip to Europe that never happened. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now. I was already pulling up flight schedules on my laptop. I'm on the next plane. Don't do anything until I get there. Don't call Victoria. Don't call her parents. Don't tip them off that we know what she's planning. What about the lawyers? I'll call Sandra on the way to the airport. We need an emergency custody order before Victoria can get those children out of the country. The flight from Portland to New York felt endless. 5 hours of turbulence and anxiety, my phone burning in my pocket with updates from Sandra's team. They'd filed an emergency motion within 2 hours of my call. Temporary restraining order preventing Victoria from removing Emma and Lucas from the state. A hearing scheduled for Friday morning. The same day as my original deadline. The system was moving fast, but would it move fast enough? I landed at JFK at 11:43 p.m. and went straight to Scarsdale. Jason was waiting in the driveway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Any word from Victoria? Nothing. I've called her 50 times. Her parents' landline just rings. I even tried that lawyer, Wentworth. He claims he doesn't know where she is. He's lying. Of course he's lying. Everyone in that family lies about everything. Jason ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of David that my heart clenched. Mom, what if she's already gone? What if she took them out of the country while we were filing paperwork? Then we'll find them. I have resources, Jason. Money, lawyers, investigators. Victoria may think she's smart, but she's never dealt with someone who actually has the means to fight back. We went inside. The house felt different without the children. Emptier, colder, like a stage set after the actors had gone home. Victoria had taken clothes, toys, the kids' favorite blankets. Small things that suggested planning, not impulse. "I found something else," Jason said, leading me to the home office. After you left on New Year's Day, I started going through Victoria's computer. Her real computer, the laptop she keeps in her closet that I wasn't supposed to know about. He opened a folder on the desk, revealing printed emails and bank statements. She's been planning this for months. Look at the dates. She started transferring money to a new account in September, right after you left. Small amounts at first, then larger. By December, she'd moved almost $90,000. The Cayman account. Different one. This is domestic. A bank in Delaware, under her maiden name. She must have opened it specifically to hide assets before the divorce. Before the divorce that she was planning while asking me for money. Yeah. Jason's voice was bitter. While she was in Seattle negotiating with you, she was already setting up her escape route. The meeting was never about reconciliation. It was about buying time. I looked at the evidence spread across his desk. Another layer of deception. Another betrayal documented in numbers and dates. Jason, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Is there any part of you that still wants to save this marriage? He was quiet for a long moment. 3 days ago, I would have said yes. Even after everything Gerald showed me, part of me was looking for a way to explain it, to fix it. Victoria's the mother of my children. We built a life together, walking away from that. And now I look at those emails and I see someone who was plotting against me while sleeping next to me. Someone who looked me in the eyes and lied, over and over, for years. Someone who took my children to her parents' house and is planning to disappear with them to God knows where. His jaw tightened. That's not a marriage I want to save. That's a hostage situation I need to escape. Friday morning, 9 a.m. Westchester County Family Court. Sandra Okonkwo had flown in from Portland the night before, arriving with 2 associates and a briefcase full of documents. On the other side of the courtroom, Victoria sat with Harold Wentworth and another lawyer I didn't recognize. Younger, hungrier, with the aggressive posture of someone who'd been promised a substantial fee. Cody and Margaret Hayes were notably absent. Smart, probably. Their involvement would only complicate Victoria's narrative. All rise. The Honorable Patricia Moreau presiding. Judge Moreau was a small woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Rosa. She reviewed the filings quickly, her frown deepening with each page. This is an emergency motion for temporary custody and a restraining order preventing the respondent from removing the minor children from New York State. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Sandra stood, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. We have evidence that the respondent has been systematically defrauding the petitioner's family for years, that she has hidden assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings, and that she has already removed the children from the family home without the petitioner's knowledge or consent. Counselor, Judge Moreau turned to Victoria's table. Wentworth rose smoothly. Your Honor, my client is a devoted mother who felt unsafe in her own home after being ambushed by her mother-in-law's hired investigators. She took her children to their grandparents' house for their protection, not as preparation for flight. The allegations of fraud are exaggerated and based on misinterpreted financial documents. Misinterpreted. Sandra's voice was dry. Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A, the formation documents for Chen Family Holdings, LLC, with a forged signature confirmed by a certified handwriting expert. The next hour was a masterclass in legal demolition. Sandra presented evidence methodically. The forged LLC documents, the bank transfers to Connecticut, the hidden Delaware account, the passport applications, the emails showing premeditation. Each piece built on the last, constructing an undeniable picture of systematic fraud and planned parental abduction. Victoria's lawyers tried to object, to reframe, to minimize. But the documents were too clear, the pattern too consistent. By the time Sandra finished, even Wentworth's confident facade had cracked. Mrs. Chen, Judge Moreau turned to Victoria, her voice cold. Do you have anything to say before I rule? Victoria stood slowly. She was dressed conservatively, navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. The picture of a respectable mother wrongly accused. Your Honor, I love my children. Everything I've done has been to protect them and provide for their future. My mother-in-law has been trying to control our family with her money for years. When I finally set boundaries, she responded with this. This witch hunt. Boundaries. Judge Moreau repeated the word like it tasted sour. Mrs. Chen, the evidence before me suggests that you forged your husband's signature on legal documents, diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars from your family to your parents, hid assets in anticipation of divorce, and removed your children from their home without their father's knowledge. Are you suggesting this is all a misunderstanding? I'm suggesting that context matters. That Patricia Chen has unlimited resources to twist the narrative while I have nothing but the $90,000 you transferred to a hidden account in Delaware. Nothing but the offshore funds your mother-in-law's investigators have traced to the Cayman Islands. Judge Moreau's voice sharpened. Mrs. Chen, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen every kind of family dispute imaginable. What I see here is not a loving mother protecting her children. What I see is a pattern of financial abuse and a flight risk. She turned to her clerk. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. The minor children, Emma and Lucas Chen, are to be returned to the family home in Scarsdale within 24 hours. The respondent is prohibited from removing them from New York State pending further proceedings. Additionally, I'm ordering the respondent to surrender all passports, hers and the children's, to the court by 5 p.m. today. Your Honor, Wentworth started. I'm not finished. Given the evidence of substantial hidden assets, I'm also ordering a full forensic accounting of all accounts controlled by or accessible to the respondent. Any attempt to move funds or liquidate assets will be considered contempt of court. She fixed Victoria with a stare that could have frozen water. Do you understand these orders, Mrs. Chen? Victoria's composure finally cracked. Her voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. Good. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a full custody hearing. Until then, the children will reside with their father, with supervised visitation for the respondent twice weekly at a location to be determined by the court. Judge Moreau gathered her papers. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Victoria caught up with us on the steps. Patricia. Wait. I turned. She looked different now, smaller somehow, without the armor of her confidence and her parents' money, just a woman in an expensive suit, watching her careful plans collapse. What do you want, Victoria? Can we talk? Just you and me, without the lawyers. Jason stepped forward protectively. Anything you want to say, you can say in front of. It's all right. I touched his arm. Give us a minute. He hesitated, then nodded and walked toward where Sandra was waiting with the car. Victoria and I stood on the courthouse steps, January wind cutting through our coats. Two women who'd been at war for longer than either of us had admitted. You've won, Victoria said quietly. Is that what you wanted to hear? I didn't want any of this, Victoria. I wanted to be a grandmother. I wanted to have a relationship with my son that didn't involve being treated like an ATM. I wanted to be respected as a member of this family, instead of tolerated as a necessary evil. And now you've destroyed everything. No, you destroyed it. Years ago, when you started lying and stealing and using my grandchildren as leverage. I'm just the one who finally stopped pretending not to notice. Victoria's eyes glistened. Tears or calculation? With her, I could never tell. My parents are going to lose their house, she said. The payments I was sending, that was the only thing keeping them afloat. Without that money, the bank will foreclose within months. That's not my problem. It's your grandchildren's problem. Emma and Lucas love their other grandparents. Do you want them to watch grandmother and grandfather Hayes become homeless? I almost admired the audacity. Even now, even facing the collapse of everything she'd built, Victoria was still trying to manipulate, still trying to make her problems someone else's responsibility. Victoria, I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. Your parents' financial situation is the result of decades of living beyond their means and expecting other people to bail them out. They raised you to believe that was acceptable behavior, and you brought that poison into my family. Whatever happens to them now is the natural consequence of choices they made long before I came along. So you're just going to let them suffer? I'm going to focus on my grandchildren, on making sure Emma and Lucas have stability and love and at least one grandmother who puts their needs ahead of her own pride. I stepped closer, dropping my voice. But let me be clear about something else. If you try to run again, If you violate the court's orders, if you attempt to take those children anywhere, I will spend every dollar I have making sure you never see them unsupervised again. And given how many dollars I have, Victoria, that's a threat you should take seriously. She stared at me, something shifting in her eyes. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The realization that she'd finally met someone who wouldn't back down, wouldn't be manipulated, wouldn't put family peace ahead of family justice. "You're not the woman I thought you were," she said finally. "No. I'm the woman you made me become." I turned and walked toward the car, leaving my daughter-in-law standing alone on the courthouse steps, the January wind whipping around her like a judgment. The children came home Saturday afternoon. Jason drove to Greenwich to collect them, accompanied by a court officer to ensure Victoria's parents didn't interfere. I waited at the Scarsdale house, pacing the living room like an expectant grandmother, which, in a way, I was. The car pulled into the driveway at 3:47 p.m. I watched through the window as Jason unbuckled car seats, as two small figures emerged into the winter sunlight. Emma saw me first. Her face lit up with a joy so pure it made my chest ache. "Grandma Pat." She ran up the walkway and threw herself into my arms, with the full-body enthusiasm that only children possess. I held her tightly, breathing in the baby shampoo smell of her hair, feeling tears stream down my face. "Hi, sweetheart. I missed you so much. Mommy said you were too busy to visit us, but I knew you'd come back. I knew it. I'll always come back for you, Emma." "Always." Lucas approached more slowly, his serious eyes studying me with that old soul intensity he'd inherited from his father. "Are you going to stay this time, Grandma Pat?" I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "Lucas, I'm going to be around a lot more from now on. Your daddy and I are going to make sure of it. Promise?" "I promise." He nodded solemnly, then stepped forward and hugged me with a fierceness that surprised us both. We went inside, all of us, together, like a real family. Jason made hot chocolate while the children showed me their Christmas presents. We ordered pizza for dinner and watched a movie, and I read 3 bedtime stories instead of the usual 2. At 8:30 p.m., Emma and Lucas were asleep, and Jason and I sat in the living room with the exhausted relief of survivors. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of help from lawyers and therapists and hopefully time. And Victoria? She'll have supervised visits. The kids need their mother, even if their mother isn't who we thought she was. But she won't have control anymore. She won't be able to use them as weapons." Jason stared into his cold hot chocolate. "I keep thinking about what she said in court. That everything she did was to protect the children and provide for their future. Part of me wonders if she actually believes that. She might. People are remarkably good at convincing themselves that their selfishness is actually sacrifice. Victoria probably genuinely thinks she was doing what was best for Emma and Lucas. She's just wrong. How do you know? Because what's best for children is stability, honesty, and love. Not elaborate schemes to extract money from relatives while teaching them that some grandmothers matter more than others. Jason set down his mug. "Mom, I need to say something." "What?" "Thank you. For fighting. For not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. For being the kind of person who doesn't just accept injustice because it's easier than confronting it." My throat tightened. "You're my son, Jason. Fighting for you is what mothers do. Not all mothers. Not every family." "What you did, the investigators, the lawyers, the court battle, most people wouldn't have the resources or the will. I got lucky. We both did. We have each other. We have Emma and Lucas. And we have the chance to do things differently going forward." "Different how?" I thought about it for a moment. "Different like homes. Open. Where we talk about problems instead of throwing money at them. Where I'm actually part of my grandchildren's lives instead of a quarterly visitor they barely recognize. Where family means showing up, not just signing checks." Jason reached across and took my hand. "I'd like that." I think I'd like that a lot. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the quiet sounds of a house where children were sleeping safely. Tomorrow, there would be more legal battles. More confrontations with Victoria and her family. More hard conversations and difficult decisions. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of supervised visits and legal filings,
and the slow, grinding machinery of divorce.
Victoria moved in with her parents, temporarily. The court wouldn't allow her to stay in the Scarsdale house, and she couldn't afford an apartment without access to the frozen accounts. I tried not to think about the irony. The woman who'd funneled my money to Connecticut for years, now dependent on her parents' crumbling hospitality. Jason filed for divorce on January 15. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but the attached exhibits told a more damning story: fraud, forgery, financial abuse, and attempted parental abduction. Victoria's lawyers fought every filing, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the month, even Harold Wentworth was making noises about settlement. "They're scared," Sandra told me during one of our weekly calls. "The criminal exposure is significant. If we referred this to the DA, Victoria could face charges for forgery, wire fraud, possibly even identity theft. Her parents might be charged as accessories. Prison time isn't off the table." What are they offering? Full custody to Jason. Supervised visitation for Victoria, stepping up to unsupervised after 2 years if she completes therapy and parenting classes. No alimony. Equal split of marital assets, which, after the hidden accounts are included, actually favors Jason. And the money they stole from me, that's where it gets interesting. They're offering full restitution, $487,000, paid over 10 years with interest. It's less than we could probably get in civil court, but it avoids a protracted legal battle. I considered it. The money mattered, but not as much as it once had. What mattered was Emma and Lucas. What mattered was making sure this chapter closed cleanly enough for everyone to move forward. What about the Hayes family? Are they included in this settlement? They want to be. Cody's lawyer has been calling daily, trying to fold their liability into Victoria's agreement. They're claiming they were passive recipients of funds, not active participants in the fraud. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But proving active participation would require a separate investigation, separate litigation. It could take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. So they get away with it. Sandra was quiet for a moment. That depends on what you mean by get away with it. Their daughter's marriage is destroyed. Their grandchildren are being raised by someone who knows exactly what they did. Their social standing in Greenwich is collapsing. The country club quietly declined to renew their membership last month, and I hear Margaret's been uninvited from several charity boards. That's not justice. That's inconvenience. Sometimes inconvenience is the only justice available. Sandra's voice softened. "Patricia, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen families tear themselves apart over money, over principle, over the need to win." Sometimes the best outcome isn't total victory. It's getting what matters most and walking away before the fight consumes everything. I thought about Emma and Lucas, about the stability they needed, about how much more damage a prolonged legal war would do to everyone involved. Let me think about it. I didn't get the chance to think for long. On February 3rd, the Spokane Review, the same paper that had published the hatchet job about me abandoning Cody and Margaret at the airport, ran a new story. Front page of the lifestyle section. Portland businesswoman accused of elder abuse in bitter family dispute. The article was devastating. Anonymous sources claimed I had been financially controlling my son for years, using money to manipulate his choices and isolate him from his wife's family. I had allegedly weaponized the legal system against a young mother, fabricating evidence to steal her children. The piece painted Victoria as a victim of a wealthy, vindictive mother-in-law who couldn't accept that her son had married someone from a better background. There were quotes from family friends describing my erratic behavior and obsessive need for control. There was a photograph of me from some charity event, cropped to make me look angry and aggressive. There was even a quote from a supposed family law expert suggesting that grandparents who use financial leverage in custody disputes should be investigated for abuse. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. Then I called Gerald. I need to know who planted this story. Names, connections, evidence. I want to know everything. Patricia, before you do anything rash. This isn't rash. This is response. They want a media war. Fine, let's see how they handle it when the other side fights back. Gerald's team worked fast. Within 48 hours, they traced the article's origins. The anonymous sources were Cody and Margaret, funneled through 2 intermediaries to maintain deniability. The family law expert was a retired attorney who sat on a charity board with Margaret. She'd called in a favor. The photograph had been pulled from my company's archived website, specifically chosen because the lighting and angle were unflattering. But the most damning discovery was the reporter herself, Patricia Morrison. The same Patricia Morrison who'd written the airport story back in December wasn't just a journalist. She was Cody Hayes' goddaughter. Her mother had been Margaret's college roommate. The connection had been carefully hidden, but Gerald found baptism records, wedding photos, a trail of family gatherings spanning 3 decades. They've been using her as a weapon all along, Gerald said, spreading the evidence across my kitchen table. The airport story wasn't journalism, it was a coordinated attack by someone who's essentially family. Can we prove it? Publicly? We can do better than that. Morrison violated every ethical standard in journalism. Her editor at the Review should have caught the conflict of interest, but he's connected to Cody's old banking network. They've been running a smear campaign through what's supposed to be an independent newspaper. I looked at the evidence, the connections, the conflicts, the calculated lies. This wasn't just Victoria anymore. This was her entire family, coordinating to destroy me even as their world collapsed around them. What are our options? Legal options. Defamation suit against the paper, complaint to the State Journalism Ethics Board, possibly civil conspiracy charges against the Hayes family. What about non-legal options? Gerald raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? I want to tell my side of the story. Not through lawyers or court filings. Directly. To everyone who read those articles and formed opinions based on lies. A media campaign of your own. Something like that. But not attack ads or anonymous sources. The truth, all of it, documented, verified, undeniable. Gerald nodded slowly. That could work. But it's risky. Once you go public with the full story, there's no taking it back. Every detail becomes part of the permanent record. Good. Let Victoria and her parents explain the forged documents and the offshore accounts on the evening news. Let them justify the years of theft while calling me the abuser. You're sure about this? I thought about Emma and Lucas, about the grandmother they deserved versus the grandmother Victoria's family was trying to make me appear. About all the people who'd read those articles and believed them, forming judgments based on lies. I'm sure. We chose our venue carefully. Not a tabloid or a local paper, but a respected national outlet. A long-form investigation for The Atlantic, supplemented by a television interview with a journalist known for thorough, fair reporting. The process took 3 weeks. Reporters verified every document, interviewed every witness, fact-checked every claim. By the time they were done, they had a story that made Victoria's media attacks look like the desperate lies they were. The Atlantic piece ran on February 28th. The Grandmother's Revenge, how one woman fought back against family fraud. It detailed everything. The years of financial support, documented with bank records. The forged LLC, confirmed by handwriting experts. The offshore accounts, traced through financial forensics. The coordinated media attacks, exposed through Gerald's investigation. But the story wasn't just about fraud. It was about family. About a grandmother who'd wanted nothing more than to be part of her grandchildren's lives, and the systematic campaign to exclude and exploit her. About a son who'd been manipulated by his wife and in-laws, and his painful journey towards seeing the truth. The television interview aired the same night. I sat across from Margaret Chen, no relation, despite the name, and answered questions for 90 minutes. I showed documents. I explained the timeline. I cried when I talked about Emma and Lucas, about the months I'd spent wondering if I'd ever see them again. I was honest about my own mistakes too, about enabling Jason's dependence for too long, about ignoring warning signs because I wanted so badly to believe in Victoria. About the ways I'd let money become a substitute for real connection. What do you want people to take away from this story? Margaret Chen asked in the final segment. That family isn't about money. It's about showing up, being present, treating each other with respect and honesty. I forgot that for a while. I thought writing checks was the same as being a good mother, a good grandmother. It isn't, and I hope other families can learn from my mistakes before they end up where I did, in court, fighting for the right to see their own grandchildren. The response was overwhelming. Within days, the story had gone viral. Not because of the fraud, though that was dramatic enough, but because it resonated. Thousands of people had experienced something similar.
family members who saw them as ATMs, relationships built on extraction rather than connection, the painful choice between peace and self-respect. I received letters, emails, messages through every social media platform I'd never used. People sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out, asking advice I wasn't qualified to give. The Hayes family received a different kind of attention. The Greenwich community, already suspicious after the country club departure and Margaret's social exile, turned hostile. Old friends stopped returning calls. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid conversation.
The local paper, not connected to Cody's network, ran a follow-up piece questioning why the Review had published such obviously biased stories. Patricia Morrison was fired within a week. Her editor retired shortly after. The Review issued a formal apology and retraction, which ran on page 12, where no one would see it. But the real consequences came from unexpected quarters. On March 5th, I received a call from an FBI agent named Thomas Rodriguez. "Mrs. Chen, we've been following the media coverage of your case. Some of what you've described, the offshore accounts, the wire transfers, the forged documents, falls within our investigative jurisdiction. We'd like to discuss the possibility of your cooperation in a broader inquiry." Broader inquiry into what? Into the Hayes family's financial activities. Your daughter-in-law's fraud may have been part of a larger pattern. Cody Hayes' banking career ended under circumstances that weren't fully investigated at the time. With your evidence and testimony, we might be able to reopen that examination. I sat down slowly, processing what he was saying. You think there's more than just what they did to me. We think there might be significantly more, yes. Would you be willing to meet with our team? I thought about Victoria's offer of settlement, about the possibility of walking away, putting this behind us, focusing on rebuilding. Then I thought about Margaret's voice on those recorded text messages. Insurance, he called it. Just in case we ever needed leverage. They've been planning to destroy me for years, documenting my moments of weakness, waiting for the chance to strike. If they'd done that to me, who else had they done it to? How many other people had been exploited, manipulated, discarded when they were no longer useful? Yes, I said. I'll cooperate fully. The meeting with the FBI took place on March 10th in a nondescript office building in White Plains. Agent Rodriguez was accompanied by 2 colleagues and a forensic accountant who made Gerald look like an amateur. For 4 hours, I walked them through everything. The financial support, Victoria's schemes, the Hayes family's involvement. I provided documents, answered questions, signed authorizations for them to access records I couldn't obtain myself. In return, they told me what they'd already found. Cody Hayes' banking career had ended not because of one compliance violation, but because he'd been running a decade-long scheme to help wealthy clients hide assets from the IRS. The investigation had been shut down through connections, a college roommate in the Justice Department, a golf buddy in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But the evidence still existed, buried in files that had never quite been destroyed. We believe your daughter-in-law learned the techniques from her father, Agent Rodriguez explained. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the forged documents, it's the same playbook, adapted for personal rather than professional use. How much are we talking about? For Cody's clients. Conservatively, 40 to 60 million in hidden assets over 15 years. Some of it has probably been recovered through other audits, but a substantial amount remains unaccounted for. 40 to 60 million. Cody Hayes, who'd looked down his nose at me for working for my money, had spent his career helping the wealthy avoid their obligations to society. What happens now? Now we build a case. It'll take time, months, possibly years. But with your evidence as a foundation, we can start pulling threads that have been loose for a long time. And the Hayes family? That depends on what we find. At minimum, Cody faces serious tax charges. Margaret may be implicated as an accessory. Victoria. Rodriguez paused. Victoria's situation is complicated. She cooperated with her parents' schemes, but she may also be able to provide testimony that strengthens the case against them. You want her to turn on her own parents? We want justice, Mrs. Chen. However it comes. I drove home from White Plains in a daze, my mind churning with everything I'd learned. This had started as a grandmother fighting to see her grandchildren. It had become something much larger, a reckoning for an entire family's worth of corruption, deception, and abuse. Jason was waiting when I got home. He'd moved back to Portland temporarily, staying in my guest room while the Scarsdale house was being prepared for sale. Emma and Lucas were with him, enrolled in a local elementary school, slowly adjusting to their new normal. "How did it go?" he asked, pouring me a glass of wine I desperately needed. "The FBI thinks your father-in-law has been helping rich people hide money from the government for 15 years. Jason set down the bottle. "What?" Victoria learned everything she did from him. The shell companies, the offshore accounts. "It's a family business." He sat down heavily across from me. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew they were sketchy about money, but I thought it was just lifestyle inflation, keeping up appearances. It was that too, but it was also crime." "Real crime, the kind that involves federal agents and potential prison sentences." "And Victoria?" "They want her to testify, against her parents." Jason was quiet for a long moment. "She won't do it. Loyalty to family is the one thing the Hayes clan actually believes in. She'll go down with them before she betrays them. Maybe, or maybe she'll realize that protecting her parents means losing her children." "That's a powerful motivator. You think she'll choose Emma and Lucas over Cody and Margaret?" I thought about the woman I'd confronted on the courthouse steps, the desperation in her eyes, the crack in her armor when she realized she'd finally lost. "I think she'll choose whatever protects Victoria. She always has. If that means sacrificing her parents, she'll find a way to justify it." "That's cynical. It's realistic. Your wife isn't evil, Jason." "She's just been raised to believe that self-interest is the same as survival. Everything she's done, the lies, the theft, the manipulation. She genuinely thought she was protecting herself and her family. She just never understood that family isn't supposed to work that way." Jason finished his wine in one long swallow. "What happens to us, to Emma and Lucas, if this becomes a federal case, if it goes to trial? Then we'll be witnesses to history instead of victims of it. And our children will grow up knowing that their grandmother fought for the truth, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Is that enough to justify everything they'll go through?" I reached across and took his hand. "It's going to have to be." Victoria called me on March 19th. Not Jason, me. The first time she'd contacted me directly since our confrontation in Seattle. "Patricia, I need to see you." Her voice sounded different, stripped of the performative sweetness, the calculated warmth, just exhaustion, and something that might have been fear. "Why?" "Because the FBI visited my parents yesterday. They took boxes of documents. My father's computers, my mother's jewelry. For some reason, I think they're checking if any of it's been used as collateral for undocumented loans." A ragged breath. "It's over, Patricia. Everything my family built, everything we tried to protect, it's all falling apart. And you want what from me? Sympathy. I want to talk, face to face, without lawyers, without Jason, without anyone else. Just you and me. Why should I agree to that?" A long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice cracked. "Because I need to understand something. I need to understand how you did it. How you walked away from your family, from me, from the life we'd all built together, and didn't look back. How you found the strength to burn it all down instead of just accepting things the way they were." It wasn't what I'd expected. Not an apology, not a negotiation, a question. A genuine question from a woman watching her world collapse and wondering how someone else had survived the same thing. "Where?" "There's a coffee shop in Stamford. Neutral territory. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock? I'll be there." The coffee shop was called The Drowsy Poet, one of those artisanal places with exposed brick and baristas who took their pour-overs very seriously. Victoria was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking. She looked terrible, not just tired, diminished somehow, like someone had let the air out of her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which she kept twisting on her finger. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to the seat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." Neither was I. I sat down, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and waited. Victoria stared at her cup for a long moment. I've been trying to figure out where it all went wrong. When the lies started. When I became this. And I think it was always there. The lying, the scheming. My parents raised me to see the world as a competition. Resources were finite, And the only way to survive was to take more than your share before someone else took it from you. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You know what my mother told me on my wedding day, she said. Jason is a good investment. His mother is wealthy and foolish. Play this right, and you'll never have to worry about money again. And you followed her advice. I followed the only playbook I knew. I'm not making excuses. I know what I did was wrong. But Patricia, you have to understand. I didn't know any other way to be. I thought about my own upbringing. Immigrant parents who'd worked 18-hour days. A childhood where money was always tight, but love was never conditional. The values David and I had tried to pass on to Jason, before Victoria's family had convinced him that those values were naive. You could have learned. You could have chosen differently. Could I? Victoria's voice was bitter.
When every choice I made was shaped by people who saw manipulation as survival.
When the only love I ever received was transactional. Perform well and you're rewarded. Fall short and you're punished. That's not an excuse. No, it's an explanation. There's a difference. She took a shaky breath. The FBI wants me to testify against my parents. They're offering immunity if I cooperate. Full immunity for the fraud, the forgery, everything. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Victoria's hands tightened around her cup. My father is facing 20 years. My mother could get 10. If I testify, I'm the reason they go to prison. If I don't, I lose my children. That's not quite true. You'd lose unsupervised access. You'd still have visitation. Don't. Victoria's voice sharpened. Don't pretend that supervised visits twice a week is the same as being their mother. Don't pretend that watching them grow up from behind a court-appointed monitor is anything but a slow death. We sat in silence. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with normal people living normal lives. Students studying, couples chatting, a mother helping her toddler with a muffin.
Normal families who had no idea what it felt like to have everything you loved held hostage by your own choices. What do you want from me, Victoria? Really? I want to know if there's another way.
A path that doesn't end with me destroying my parents or losing my children. A compromise that lets everyone survive. There isn't. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. Some situations had no good options, only less bad ones. There has to be. There isn't. You can protect your parents and lose meaningful access to Emma and Lucas.
Or you can testify and watch your family go to prison. Those are your choices.
The time for compromises was years ago, before the first forged document, before the first stolen dollar. Victoria's face crumpled. Not the theatrical tears she'd used to manipulate Jason, but real grief. The ugly, uncontrolled kind that can't be faked. I never wanted it to be like this. I wanted to be safe, to know that no matter what happened, I'd have enough. That my children would have enough. Is that so wrong? No. Wanting security isn't wrong. But the way you pursued it, lying, stealing, using people who trusted you, that was wrong. And the tragedy is, you had enough. You had a husband who loved you, children who adored you, a mother-in-law who would have given you anything if you'd just treated her with basic respect. You had everything, Victoria. You just couldn't see it because your parents taught you that nothing was ever enough. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. So what do I do? How do I fix this? You can't fix it, but you can make choices about what comes next. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. Testify. Tell the truth. Accept responsibility for what you did and let your parents accept responsibility for what they did. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for a long time. But it's the only path that leads somewhere other than more lies and more destruction. And if I do, if I cooperate, will you let me be part of Emma and Lucas's lives? That depends. On what? On whether you actually change. On whether you can learn to be honest, to have relationships that aren't transactional, to put your children's well-being ahead of your own comfort. I'm not going to reward a performance, Victoria. I've seen too many of those. But if you genuinely become someone different, someone who deserves to be their mother, then yes, I'll advocate for your relationship with them. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, the last remnants of the mask falling away, leaving behind someone smaller and more human than I'd ever seen. You really mean that? I really do. Despite everything, I don't want Emma and Lucas to grow up without their mother. I just want them to have a mother worth having.
She nodded slowly. I'll do it. I'll testify. Are you sure?
Once you start down that road, I'm sure. Victoria's voice steadied, finding something that almost sounded like resolve. My parents made their choices. I made mine.
It's time to stop pretending that loyalty means protecting people from the consequences of what they've done.
She stood, gathering her coat, then paused. Patricia, thank you. For being honest with me.
For not pretending there was an easy way out. You're welcome. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I may never deserve it.
But I'm going to try to become someone who does. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me alone with cold coffee and the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Victoria testified on April 12th. The grand jury proceedings were sealed, but the FBI kept me informed through Agent Rodriguez. She gave them everything. The financial records, the communication logs, the details of her parents' schemes that even Gerald hadn't uncovered. Cody Hayes had been running his asset-hiding operation for almost 20 years, not 15. The total amount concealed from the IRS approached $90 million. He charged his clients fees of 15 to 20%, heaping the profits in a web of shell companies that Victoria knew intimately because he taught her how to manage them. Margaret wasn't an accessory. She was a full partner. She'd used her charity work and social connections to identify potential clients. Wealthy people who complained about taxes at country club dinners and foundation galas. Then Cody would approach them, offering a discreet solution. The Hayes family's lifestyle hadn't been maintained by old money or careful investments. It had been funded by systematic tax fraud. Your daughter-in-law's testimony is the linchpin of the case, Agent Rodriguez told me during one of our calls. Without her, we had circumstantial evidence and suspicious patterns.
With her, we have names, dates, amounts, methods. The whole operation laid bare. What happens to her now? She's got immunity for her testimony.
The divorce proceedings will continue, but she won't face criminal charges for the fraud against you. That's being handled as a civil matter within the divorce settlement. And her parents' arraignment is scheduled for next week. Cody's facing 12 counts of tax evasion, 8 counts of wire fraud, and conspiracy charges that could add another decade to his sentence. Margaret has 4 counts of conspiracy and 2 of wire fraud. How are they taking it? Not well. Cody tried to flee the country last Tuesday, made it as far as JFK before our people picked him up. Now he's in custody pending trial. Margaret posted bond, but she's under house arrest. Cody Hayes, the man who'd looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe, caught trying to escape prosecution like a common criminal. There was a certain poetry to it. What about the money they took from me? The restitution. That's being folded into the civil forfeiture process. The government is seizing assets tied to the fraud, the Greenwich estate, several investment accounts, jewelry, vehicles. After federal claims are satisfied, victims like you will be compensated from what remains. Will there be anything left? Hard to say. They spent lavishly and hid assets badly. But you should recover at least a portion of what was taken. Our forensic team is still tracing accounts. The arraignment was a media circus. News vans lined the street outside the federal courthouse in New Haven. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who looked remotely connected to the case. Inside, a gallery packed with journalists and curious observers watched Cody and Margaret Hayes enter pleas of not guilty to enough charges to keep them in prison until they died. I watched from the back row, invisible among the crowd. Margaret spotted me first, her eyes locked onto mine across the courtroom, filled with a hatred so pure it was almost admirable. This woman had spent years trying to destroy me, and even now, facing the collapse of everything she'd built, she still blamed me for her downfall. Cody didn't look at anyone. He stood with his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. The banking executive who'd wielded power and connections like weapons had become a hollow man, empty of everything but fear. When the judge asked if they understood the charges, their voices were barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. The Hayes Empire had finally fallen, not through any dramatic confrontation or satisfying showdown, but through the quiet accumulation of evidence and testimony. Through a daughter who'd chosen her children over her parents' secrets. Through the simple, devastating power of truth. Jason and I had dinner that night at a small Italian place in Portland. The children were with a babysitter, Mrs. Kowalski from next door, a grandmother herself who'd become a godsend during the transition. How do you feel? He asked, pouring us both wine. Tired.
Relieved. A little sad, honestly. Sad. Sad that it had to come to this, that we couldn't have found some way to be a real family instead of whatever we were pretending to be. We were never pretending. We just made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, lost sight of what mattered. Is that all it was?
Mistakes? Jason set down his glass.
What do you mean? I mean, you let them treat me like an outsider for years, Jason. You sat at that dining table while Victoria's mother put me in my place, and you said nothing.
You took my money and spent it on people who despise me. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices. The words hung between us.
We'd been so focused on fighting Victoria and her family that we'd never really addressed what Jason had done or failed to do. You're right, he said quietly. They were choices, bad ones.
Cowardly ones. He looked at me with eyes that held none of the defensiveness I'd learned to expect. I told myself I was keeping the peace, protecting the family stability. But really, I was just avoiding conflict, taking the easy path and letting you pay the price. Why? Because I was scared. Of Victoria, of her parents, of what it would mean to stand up to them. You raised me to be kind, Mom, to see the best in people. But somewhere along the way, I confused kindness with weakness. I thought that staying quiet was the same as keeping everyone happy. It wasn't. No, it was just keeping me comfortable while you suffered. He reached across the table and took my hand. I can't undo what happened. I can't give you back those years or that money or the relationship we should have had. But I can promise you that I'm done being a coward. I'm done choosing comfort over what's right. I squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick my eyes. That's all I ever wanted, Jason. Not the money. Not the gratitude. Just a son who would stand beside me instead of hiding behind someone else. You have that now. I know it's late. I know it's not enough. But you have it. We ate in comfortable silence after that. Two people slowly rebuilding a bridge that had been burning for years. The custody agreement was finalized on May 1st. Jason received primary custody of Emma and Lucas. Victoria got visitation every other weekend, unsupervised, despite the original court order, because she'd cooperated with the investigation and completed the first phase of her court-ordered therapy. The arrangement would be reviewed in 6 months, with the possibility of expanding her time if she continued to demonstrate good faith. I was written into the agreement as well. Guaranteed monthly visits, regardless of where the children lived. Weekly video calls at minimum. A role in major decisions about their education, healthcare, and welfare. It wasn't everything I'd wanted, but it was more than I'd had, and infinitely more than I'd feared losing. How do you want to celebrate? Jason asked as we left the courthouse. I want to see my grandchildren. I want to sit with them and read stories, and not worry about court dates or custody hearings, or anything except being their grandmother. I think that can be arranged. That evening, I sat on the floor of Jason's living room, my living room now. 2, since he'd decided to stay in Portland permanently, while Emma showed me her latest art project and Lucas explained the plot of a book about dragons that I'd read to him 100 times but somehow always had new details. The house smelled of the dinner we'd made together. The windows showed the spring sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in Connecticut, the Hayes family was facing the wreckage of their choices. But here, in this room, with these children, none of that mattered. Grandma Pat? Emma looked up from her drawing. Are you going to live with us forever now? Not forever, sweetheart, but for a long time. Is that okay? She considered this seriously, the way children do. Yes, because you make Daddy smile, and you read better voices than the babysitter. Lucas nodded solemnly. The babysitter does a bad dragon. Well, we can't have that. I pulled them both closer, breathing in the simple joy of their presence. I promised to do the best dragon voice in the entire world. Pinky promise? I linked my pinky with Emma's tiny one. Pinky promise. Jason watched from the doorway, his expression soft in a way I hadn't seen since before Victoria, before the money troubles and family wars, before everything had gone so wrong. Hey Mom. Yes, thank you. For fighting, for not giving up, for being the kind of grandmother they deserve. Thank you for letting me be. He smiled, really smiled, the way he used to when he was small and the world was simple and families were just people who loved each other. Welcome home, Mom. 6 months later. October in Portland was everything I remembered. The leaves turning gold and crimson, the air carrying that particular crisp sweetness of autumn in the Pacific Northwest. I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea, watching Emma and Lucas chase each other through piles of leaves that David would have spent hours raking into perfect rows. He would have loved this, I thought. The chaos of grandchildren, the mess of living. All those years we'd worked so hard, building something we thought was for Jason's future. We never imagined it would become a weapon used against us. But David had also taught me something else. You can't control what other people do with your gifts. You can only control whether you keep giving. I'd stopped giving blindly, but I hadn't stopped giving. The Hayes trial concluded in August. Cody was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. The judge cited the scope of the fraud, the betrayal of fiduciary duty, and his attempted flight as aggravating factors. He'd be 79 when he got out, if he survived that long. Margaret received 8 years. She'd cooperated slightly more than her husband, not out of remorse, I suspected, but out of calculation. Even facing prison, she was still looking for angles. The judge saw through it but reduced her sentence anyway, citing her age and lack of direct involvement in the day-to-day operations. The Greenwich estate was seized and sold at auction. $3.2 million, less than half what they'd paid for it, but enough to cover a portion of the restitution owed to victims. I received $340,000, about 70% of what Victoria had admitted to diverting. The rest was lost to legal fees, penalties, and the government's share. I donated the entire amount to the Portland Children's Hospital, in Maria's name. The money had been poisoned from the start. Better to let it do some good for children who needed it than to let it sit in my accounts as a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Victoria's transformation was slower and less dramatic than a movie would have made it. She didn't have a single moment of redemption, a tearful apology that fixed everything. Instead, she had months of therapy, court-ordered parenting classes, and the grinding work of rebuilding trust, one small action at a time. She got a job. A real job, not the brand management consulting she'd done before, but an entry-level position at a nonprofit that helped families navigate the social services system. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Victoria Hayes, May Chen, former society wife, now helping people who'd never had the advantages she'd squandered. It's humbling, she told me during one of our increasingly regular conversations. These families have nothing. No safety net, no connections, no one to bail them out when things go wrong. And they're still fighting. They're still trying to give their kids better lives. What do you learn from them? That I've been selfish my entire life without even knowing it. That everything I thought I deserved was actually just luck, circumstance, the accident of being born to parents who had money, even if that money was stolen. She paused, gathering herself. I think about what my parents taught me. How to see people as resources. How to calculate every relationship in terms of what I could extract from it. And I look at these families, these mothers working 3 jobs, these fathers choosing between food and medicine, and I realize that my parents' philosophy wasn't just wrong, it was obscene. Does realizing that change anything? It changes everything. And nothing. Victoria's voice was quiet, honest in a way I'd never heard from her before. I can't undo what I did to you, Patricia. I can't give Jason back the years I manipulated him. I can't erase the damage to Emma and Lucas. But I can try to be different going forward. I can try to teach them something better than what I was taught. Are you succeeding? Some days. Other days, I catch myself falling into old patterns. The manipulation, the calculations, and I have to stop and remember who I'm trying to become. She met my eyes. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and probably the most important. Victoria's visitation had expanded to 1 week per month by October. The children were adapting better than any of us had expected. Kids are resilient that way, bending where adults would break. Emma, now 7, had become fiercely protective of family harmony. She monitored conversations for tension, changed subjects when topics got uncomfortable, made sure everyone was included in games and activities. A little peacekeeper, learning too young that love sometimes required careful navigation. Lucas, 6, was quieter. He asked questions that pierced straight to the heart. Why doesn't Mommy live with us? Did Grandmother Hayes do something bad? Is it my fault everyone is sad? And we answered as honestly as we could without burdening him with adult complexities. Your mommy and daddy are living in different houses because that works better for everyone right now.
Jason explained during one of these conversations. But we both love you exactly the same, no matter where we sleep at night. And Grandma Pat. Grandma Pat loves you most of all, I said, pulling him into my lap. Grandma Pat fought dragons to be here with you. Real dragons. The worst kind.
The kind that look like people. Lucas considered this seriously. Did you win? I did. Because I had something worth fighting for. Thanksgiving came early that year, or maybe it just felt that way, after everything we'd been through. I hosted dinner at my house for the first time since Maria died. Jason helped with the cooking. Victoria arrived with the children, bearing a pie she'd made herself. Imperfect, lopsided, nothing like the professional desserts she used to order from expensive bakeries. It's a little burnt on one side, she admitted, setting it on the counter. I'm still learning. It's perfect, I said. And meant it. Rosa came with her daughter's family. My cousin Ming brought his new girlfriend. The house filled with noise and laughter, and the particular chaos that happens when too many people try to share too small a kitchen. David's garden was dormant for winter, but I'd planted bulbs in September, tulips and daffodils that would bloom in spring, a promise of renewal waiting beneath the frozen soil. We gathered around my dining room table, 14 people squeezed into space meant for 8. The food was abundant, but imperfect. Turkey slightly dry, stuffing slightly underdone. Everything exactly as homemade food should be. Before we eat, I said, raising my glass, I want to say something. The table quieted. Emma looked up from the roll she was already sneaking bites of. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My son, my grandchildren. The family I'd spent my whole life trying to build. I was alone in this house, counting the days until Christmas without anyone to share it. Jason reached across and took my hand. Victoria looked down at her plate, blinking rapidly. But here's what I've learned. Family isn't something you can lose. Not really. Because family isn't blood or legal documents, or the people you're supposed to love. Family is the people who show up, who do the hard work of forgiveness and change, who choose each other, again and again, even when it's difficult. I looked around the table at the faces assembled there. My son, who'd finally become the man I'd raised him to be. His ex-wife, who was becoming someone new entirely. My grandchildren, innocent and loved and protected. Rosa and Ming and all the others who'd stood by me when standing alone seemed impossible. So, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing this family, even when it would have been easier to walk away. And thank you for giving me something I never expected to have again. Hope. To family, Rosa said, raising her glass. To family, the table echoed. Emma's voice piped up above the rest. And to Grandma Pat's dragon fighting. We laughed. We drank. We ate imperfect food and told imperfect stories and made the kind of memories that would outlast all of us. It wasn't the family I'd imagined. It was better. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep and Jason had retreated to his room with a book, I sat alone on my back porch one last time. The stars were bright over Portland, brighter than they should have been, with all the city lights below. Maria used to say that stars were just holes in the floor of heaven, letting the light shine through. David said that was unscientific nonsense, but he'd always smiled when she said it. I missed them both. I would always miss them, but missing people doesn't mean life stops. Grief doesn't cancel joy, and loss doesn't erase love. You carry all of it, the pain and the beauty, the betrayals and the redemptions. And somehow, if you're lucky, you find a way to keep walking forward. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, desperate to buy her way into a family that didn't want her, willing to accept any treatment, any disrespect, as long as she could remain connected to her son and grandchildren. That woman had believed that love meant sacrifice without limits, generosity without boundaries, giving until there was nothing left to give. She'd been wrong. Real love has boundaries. Real family requires respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling the people who are hurting you, even if those people are the ones you love most. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, through court battles and FBI investigations and the systematic destruction of my daughter-in-law's family, through months of fear and grief and rage that burned so hot I thought it might consume me. But I'd come out the other side, scarred but standing, wiser than before. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Kids want to know if you'll make pancakes tomorrow. I smiled and typed back, Only if Lucas does the dragon voice. He says he's been practicing. Then tell him he has a deal. I set down the phone and looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere in federal prison, Cody Hayes was spending his first holiday away from the family he'd built on lies. Margaret was in a minimum security facility in Connecticut, surrounded by women who didn't care about her Greenwich pedigree or her Martha's Vineyard summers. Their empire had crumbled, their reputation destroyed, their legacy nothing but a cautionary tale. I could have felt satisfied by that. Vindicated. The wronged grandmother who'd brought down the people who'd wronged her. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of anger. Tired of fighting. Ready to spend whatever years I had left focused on building instead of destroying. Tomorrow, I would make pancakes for my grandchildren. Next week, I would have lunch with Victoria, continuing the slow work of whatever our relationship was becoming. Next month, Jason and I would celebrate his birthday together, the first birthday in years where I'd actually be welcome at the party. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of things that families do when they're healthy and whole and actually care about each other. That was my revenge, in the end. Not the court victories or the media coverage or the prison sentences. My revenge was living well, being happy, building a family that actually deserved the name. Victoria's mother had said I didn't know my place. She was right. I didn't. My place was here, in this house, surrounded by people who loved me. My place was with my grandchildren, reading them stories and teaching them that people have value beyond what they can provide. My place was in a future that I'd fought for, bled for, nearly lost myself trying to reach. And nobody, not Victoria, not her parents, not anyone, was ever going to take that from me again. The next morning, I woke early and started mixing batter. Lucas appeared first, still in his pajamas, dragon book clutched under his arm. Grandma Pat? I practiced the voices all night. Did you? Let's hear the dragon. He squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and roared. A surprisingly fierce sound from such a small person. That's terrifying. You're going to be a wonderful dragon. Emma came down next, followed by Jason, and soon the kitchen was full of flour and laughter and the smell of butter sizzling on the griddle. We burned the first batch and undercooked the second. But the third was perfect, golden brown, fluffy, exactly the way David used to make them. Can we have chocolate chips? Emma asked. Absolutely not. I paused. Well, maybe a few. Grandma Pat is the best, Lucas announced through a mouthful of pancake. Don't talk with your mouth full. Grandma Pat is the best, he repeated, more carefully, after swallowing. Jason caught my eye across the table, his expression soft with something that looked like peace. He's not wrong, you know. I know. I smiled, watching my family eat breakfast together like a normal family on a normal morning. Believe me, I know. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story, for caring about what happened to a grandmother who just wanted to see her grandchildren. If you're going through something similar, if someone in your family is using love as leverage, money as manipulation, or children as weapons, please know that you're not alone. And please know that it's possible to fight back. It's possible to set boundaries, demand respect, and rebuild something better from the wreckage. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But on the other side of that fight, there's a morning like this one. Pancakes with your grandchildren, coffee with your son, a future that you built with your own 2 hands. That's worth fighting for. That's worth everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for your family? Have you ever had to let someone go to protect yourself? I'd love to hear your stories. For the next story, click on the video on your left.